Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, my name is Mark and welcome to another installment of my ranking of roguelike and roguelite games that I've played in recent months. This is my third tier list, so if you haven't watched the others, I'd recommend checking those out, especially if you're looking for more popular titles that I may have already covered. And since then, I've been playing even more roguelikes that I want to review and talk about their design. For those of you who do not know me, hello, my name is Mark, and I really like roguelikes. I've been working in the video game industry for many years in many different fields, including voice acting, voice engineering, video game design, music composition, sound designing, playtesting, and now even helping developers and indie companies with roguelike consultation work. I also regularly stream new roguelike games and demos that have been sent to the channel, giving my first impressions and overall feedback, resulting in my Steam library now having upwards of like 200 different roguelike games, so thank you for that. Alright, let me quickly explain how this is going to go. First off, once again, this list is just my own opinion. If you disagree, then good. Let's have a conversation. Feel free to express yourself in the comments down below. I tend to read all of them, and I always find it very interesting to see different point of views on all these games. These are, for the most part, all games that have at least very positive reviews on Steam, meaning that all of them have great potential, even if I personally didn't fully enjoy some of them. This obviously doesn't mean that you won't. I'd say I honestly respect all of them. All the music that you'll be hearing come from these games, and you can find them in the description down below. And if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to skip ahead to any games you wish to see by checking out the timestamps. I will be covering every game in alphabetical order. Also, just to keep things simple, I'll be calling all these games roguelikes. I'm not going to get into the whole conversation of the term being used correctly or not, but if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on that matter, I made an entire video discussing this rather interesting, controversial topic. And if you enjoy this kind of video, then feel free to subscribe, like, and comment. It really does help the channel out. Alright, our very first game is going to be a robot named Fight. This is a Metroidvania roguelike action game. And what an interesting one to start with. Now, if you've played Metroidvanias and if you've played roguelikes, you might think that, well, these don't tend to combine very well, and you might be right with that. I would say that in general, it's really hard to do a Metroidvania roguelike, and there's very few out there. There's a pretty obvious reason for it. You know, they're kind of conflicting genres, which I'll talk about in a second. The most popular one of this kind of genre is Dead Cells, but to be honest, I don't treat Dead Cells as a true Metroidvania roguelike. This is a true Metroidvania roguelike. However you can do it, that's what it is. Basically, this is a game that takes heavy inspiration and just really wants to be, you know, your old-fashioned Metroid game. 2D platformer with kind of like awkward controls where you have to stay pressed on the button to shoot on a diagonal. You explore the areas, you find different abilities, different weapons, you fight different bosses, and you just explore until you fight the final boss. Now, once again, in Metroidvanias, the whole concept is exploring, backtracking, and then finding new areas that you can finally access to get into new biomes, kill more bosses, explore, find secrets, and then get to the very end after a long adventure. So how do you make that a roguelike? Well, it's pretty tricky. And I think they did a pretty good job at it. Basically, you're gonna start and you're gonna be very weak from the start. You're gonna always start at the same biome, but everything is going to be randomly generated in terms of the levels and the actual monsters you fight. Now, that being said, in general, the first, like, every biome is gonna have a set limit amount of enemies as expected, and I think that's a bit of a shame in general because basically you're always going to be starting the same, fighting the same enemies in the same areas. Yes, everything is randomly generated in terms of like the level design and the enemies, but the gameplay is very simple at its core. If you've played these old Metroid games, then that shouldn't be a surprise that effectively it's supposed to be awkward. There's nothing too strategic in terms of how you control your character and everything. It's about what you discover. And what you discover does get really fun, and getting these different items, different biomes, seeing all these things, and finding a bunch of new bosses every single run, because yeah, basically you're going to be fighting different bosses depending on the seed you're on. That's really cool. Does it give you the same sense of exploration as a Metroidvania? I would say the first time around, yes, but the replayability is a bit interesting. Overall, I would say that this game kind of suffers from just the inherent fact that these two genres don't collide very well. But if I were to have to pick a game that tries to be a Metroidvania and a roguelike, I'd say that this is probably the best one out there. And if you really like the old-fashioned Metroid game, then, I mean, look at it. Like, it's literally that. It's just Metroid. The lore is pretty straightforward and simple. I like the vibe overall. The enemy variation is pretty great. I think a lot of the level design can be a little long sometimes, and having to backtrack and having enemies respawn every single room can sometimes feel a little tedious. But my biggest issue in general is the fact that generally in Metroidvanias, the start is always very simple and very minimalistic, which is cool when you get started because you kind of feel like the sense of that you're going to be progressing, you're going to be just getting stronger and stronger as you progress and as you explore. But since it's a roguelike, you're going to be starting from scratch at the start of every run. And if there was a way for me to skip to the mid-game more frequently, I think I could see myself playing this more regularly. But for me, I think that this really is just an homage to old-fashioned Metroid games, and if people like having a little kind of a cool twist being roguelike, there is a lot of different items, a lot of different bosses to find. I haven't found everything. I beat the game twice, I think, and both felt really cool and unique by the end, but it took a second to get to the point where it felt like a unique adventure, right? So I would say that this was a very enjoyable experience that's very unique. Like, there are not many games that can do this kind of blend and actually be faithful to, you know, what they're going for, roguelikes and Metroidvania. So in that regard, I really applaud. The vibe is fantastic, right? Like, obviously the pixel art and the music is super fitting, super cool. It does bring back nostalgia vibes because I play a lot of these games back in the day as well. In the essence of old Metroid games, they also don't explain a lot of things. There's going to be a lot of secret walls, and a lot of items that you find don't really have a lot of descriptions. Sometimes you find shrines and you don't actually know what they do until you give some items or pay for it. And if it was like a normal Metroid game, that's fine, because if you do something in a Metroid game, usually you can always, you know, go back to a previous save file. It doesn't matter if you die. But in this game, if you take a risk and you buy something that you don't know what it is, and that actually gets you to die later on, that feels way more punishing in a Metroid game where, you know, if you die because you did a bad decision, who cares, right? You're gonna start again in the last save point. So in that regard, I think that can be a little tricky. It can feel a little punishing. But once again, if you think you're gonna like this kind of blend, then I can't think of a better game out there that does it. So I would say in general, this is a pretty solid B-tier game here. I wish I could love it more, and I wish I was more in love with just Metroid games, because I think if I was a massive Metroidvania fan, which I used to be, but now I play so much roguelikes, then I think that this is a more interesting Metroidvania game than a roguelike, because ultimately it takes a while for things to get going, and if you like exploration, then yeah, I would say give this one a try. I wasn't a fan of this game, didn't like the controls. It's interesting, right? Because that is kind of the idea, is like, you know, oh, it's based on the old controls of the Metroid games, which I get, and again, it's a great homage, but why can't you just aim, you know, with your gun and like have more interesting enemies that you can like have be faster and everything? But again, that's the genre, that's the style they're going for, so I get it. But yeah, the controls, if you're not used to playing these old Metroid games, you might be a little thrown off by them. All right, next up, we've got Archon. Archon or Archons? It's Archons. So this is going to be the first of, I believe, a few Horde-likes. I like to call them Horde-likes. They're actually Vampire Survivors / Bullet Heaven games. And if you don't know what they are, basically you're fighting just hordes of enemies, and it's very, very simple mechanics, controls. You're just getting more and more, you're just getting stronger and stronger as you're getting more abilities, and just killing a bunch of stuff around you. It feels great. They're enjoyable. That's the basics of a Horde-like. I'm actually making a video about them, talking more about some of their design. But anyway, so Archon is another one of those. But unfortunately, bad example for people that don't know what a Horde-like is, because Archon decided to take a very, very unique approach to this genre. Basically, in this game, as you can see, you're actually controlling two characters. Now, this game can be co-op, and some may say that that's how you're supposed to play it, because clearly there's two characters. I'm not going to be covering games in terms of their co-op and multiplayer aspect. If they have a single player option, I'm just going to be reviewing it as that. But in this instance, I actually think that it's probably even more interesting, at least to me and to a lot of players, as a single player game where you control 2 characters. Basically, you get into your levels, you know, your horde-like levels. You're just dropped in there with just one ability that usually does sync with your characters. For instance, you know, you create a beam between your characters, and the further you go, the bigger the beam gets, that kind of stuff. And that's how you kill your enemies. You have to be controlling both of them. You're controlling just their movement, and luckily enough, Horde-likes tend to be very minimalistic in their controls, which works out great for this instance. So all you have to focus on is just being able to move 2 characters at the same time. It is a lot to think about, and to, you know, it does seem a little overwhelming, but effectively, once you get the vibe and once you get into the ball rolling and really being able to focus on 2 characters at the same time, my goodness, does this game feel awesome. I have never seen a game do this, and especially for a horde-like. And if you know me, then you know that I love roguelike games that have a little twist, something unique about them, because there's so many out them. And I've just never seen this kind of mechanic being used so well, and combining it with like the perfect genre. I think the gameplay is just so interesting, and I could imagine that it might not be fitting for a lot of people naturally, because if you just cannot, if your brain can't just click to it, yeah, you're gonna have a rough time. There's some meta progression. A lot of horde-likes tend to have meta progression. So the more you play, the more you're gonna be unlocking new abilities to find. You're gonna make your characters stronger. There's quite a bit of meta progression, and I think that's cool. I think it's a game that you need to get used to anyway. So I think it's fair that you're gonna be spending the first few runs not completing it and upgrading your abilities here. I think it's very fitting. I like the upgrades. I like the different abilities. They all feel quite different. And since you have this inherent movement like craziness, any ability that just has a little bit of just getting used to with the movement makes it very unique. So I think that every run feels quite different purely because of just the movement aspect of it. So I really praise the game for just being able to utilize this cool concept and create fun abilities and items through them. There's also, you can also get a little crazier by adding bumpers for like certain guns every now and then that will automatically aim, and even the triggers that can be defensive tools, including teleportation and like being invulnerable. It sounds like a lot, but trust me, once you get going, I think the game has a nice progression system where, you know, at first it's fairly simple. There's not too much to pick from. They slowly introduce more and more things. Now, if I were to give some feedback, I do feel like the game is quite short, unfortunately. There is obviously a lot of replayability, but with how nice the game looks and the feel and the abilities, there's actually only 3 levels, and each level ends with 1 boss at the end. All the bosses are always the same, playing exactly the same. There's a different difficulty meter, but it doesn't feel like it's adding too much that's new. I kind of wish there was more content in some of the levels and enemy variation. I actually really like the enemy design in general. So I just wish there was more. And I thought that this game was in early access, but no, it seems to be fully released. So I'm hoping that they will be adding, you know, DLC, more content, because honestly, a new map I am all in for. And I also didn't talk about potentially the coolest aspect of this game. Basically, everything is to the beat of the music. The music is really cool. It's kind of like electronic, but not too like aggressive, just like kind of vibey electronic music that has like a very steady beat in the back. And everything is synced to it. That includes the ticking of those numbers on like your aura. Whenever your hammer falls from like your ability, this ability would go dum, 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 dum. Every time like an enemy takes damage from like a damage over time effect, for instance, is also going to be in the beat. And once you have a lot of abilities and a lot of enemies take damage, like all this sound design kind of combines with the music and actually sounds awesome and makes you feel really cool. And not only that, you can even use that strategically in gameplay. Once you get comfortable, you know when some of these abilities will trigger. There's a ability that are, I think you throw grenades on the floor, and you throw a bunch of grenades and they only explode after like 2-3 seconds. But since you know when it's gonna trigger by the beat of the music, you can actually kind of like actually utilize that to your advantage. And sometimes if you get really comfortable, I see a bunch of grenades and I see some enemies coming next to me. I know it's gonna trigger at the end of this musical measure, and then it does, and it feels awesome. It's so random that it was added to a game like this, and I absolutely love it. That is just such a massive big thumbs up for me. I think the bosses are really cool. They're extremely hard, especially the second boss. Oh my gosh. One aspect that I just don't love, a lot of games do this, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but it's something that I wish was thought of more in a lot of games, is that the bosses, all three bosses, maybe even not the third one, but at least most of the bosses, they are just one singular big, boss, which is cool. You have to deal damage to it. But the problem is that there's a lot of abilities that are just all about when an enemy dies, or, bouncing things back between enemies, that kind of stuff, which are completely useless against bosses that don't have ads with them, even if they're tiny little spiders that you can instantly kill to make you feel satisfied to at least have some of these effects trigger during a boss fight. It's a small thing, admittedly, but considering the fact that the bosses are really the hardest part of the game, it makes me feel like I'm never going to be picking these boons, because they're just going to make it way harder once I get to the boss fight. Overall, Archons was a really pleasantly amazing surprise to me. I love this game. It combines a very intimidating aspect of controlling two characters at once, but really makes sure to give time to the players to adjust. As you can see, the gameplay is pretty slow, right? There's not a lot of enemies that are instantly shooting at you and going to you. There's not many bullets to evade until the very end of the game, which is nice because, again, you're just getting comfortable with those controls. Enemies don't immediately hurt you. There's not like a hurt box on enemies. Every time you get close to an enemy, they do eventually trigger an ability you have to evade, but it doesn't feel punishing. And I think it's pretty easy to keep track of everything, and usually when I take damage, I know why I took damage, even if my characters are very far apart, because the game is just really well designed in that regard to pretty much always make sure that the players have the good feedback. And even though it's shorter than I wish it was, and there are a few things I think could have been tweaked here and there, I think Archon deserves a solid A spot. Next up, we've got Ballionaire. I think that's how you say it. This game caught my attention. This definitely did fairly well for a bit. I think a lot of streamers played it, and it kind of looked pretty crazy, And I think this is the kind of game that definitely got more recognition after Ballionaire. The concept of just having a simple mechanic that you see in real life, like dropping a ball, like those little games, right? But then making it into a roguelike, into something that can go infinite and do some crazy stuff. So that's what Ballionaire is. You drop a ball, things happen automatically, and you get to see the fireworks occur. I know a lot of people were excited for me to talk about this game, and I'm gonna be honest, I was a little bit disappointed by it overall. I love roguelikes that make you feel super powerful, and when you can break a roguelike, let's be honest, those are some of the most interesting and fun moments, is when you break a roguelike, right? We have like crazy numbers happening. I mean, again, that's one of the reasons why Ballionaire is so popular, upon many reasons, right? Like, just big numbers go boom is always fun. In the case of Ballionaire, first off, I think the game is pretty satisfying, but I think it's not as satisfying visually as other games that are all about making things go crazy. Differently than a game like Ballionaire, for instance, you don't get to see everything very clearly happen for a reason. Like, it's hard to keep track of what's going on. Now, the more you play the game, the more you kind of understand what's going on, just because, you've placed all these things throughout your board to create these, domino effects. But I wasn't as satisfied as a game like Ballionaire, where it was very clear why the numbers were going up. I actually think that the best comparison to this game is not Ballionaire, but it's actually Luck Be a Landlord, which was a slot machine roguelike. I don't know if many people compare it to this, but that's for me is the closest comparison. Because in Luck Be a Landlord, you just start your slot machine and you don't do anything after that, and you just see numbers go up after doing so. This is exactly the same thing. You can't move the direction of where you're going to be dropping your ball. This does it automatically. You literally just press a button and you see the fireworks occur. And so in Luck Be a Landlord, when you know, when you have those big numbers and those big things triggering, it's done what at a time, which obviously it can be done because it's not in real time, right? It's not in real time. You just see a screen and it shows you all the points. Here, the fact that it's real time and there's so much chaos, for me, it didn't feel as satisfying. It just felt like big numbers. And getting to the big numbers and the craziness is pretty simple. I was able to freeze the game in my third attempt. When I mean freeze the game, like it was basically I dropped it and then nothing would happen. I would just hear. It was fun, don't get me wrong, and it was really satisfying the first time, but it didn't feel massively earned to me because I got on my third try without unlocking too much and without knowing too much in general. So I think it's pretty easy to consistently have a kind of broken board, and if you don't have one of those broken boards, I think you can easily lose. I think it's fun, and there are some definite cool synergies you can find, but the more you play, the more you can unlock new things that can appear in your run. The thing is, a lot of these things that can appear in your run are synergetic with specific other things you have. So the more you unlock things, the more the pool kind of gets bloated. So it almost felt like it was actually easier at the beginning with less items. The different maps are cool. They all have unique twists, but in the end, they don't really matter too much just because of the inherent nature of the game, where once you have a few of these things on the board, doesn't matter which board it is, it will just go boom. The art is kind of goofy, it's kind of memey. Yeah, that's funny. Sure. And the music is pretty good, actually. It was fun, and it's a unique roguelike for sure. I was a little bit more disappointed than other people, I would say. I don't think it's a bad game whatsoever. I guess I was expecting more from what people were saying originally. I had fun playing it, and I might come back to it. I think I'm gonna put this game as a B, because all things considered, once again, I might have spent most of it saying negative things, but in its core, it's pretty unique, it's pretty fun, it's well done. In general, I just was expecting more personally, so I'm gonna put it as under a robot named Fight. I love Ballionaire. It just needs more content, and some of the synergies can be confusing. Yeah, I mean, the content aspect, that's always a tricky part with a lot of these games, right? Because you want more content, but in this instance, right, like, what kind of content would be better? Because I think adding more items might, again, just add too much to the game, and I think the problem is that there's just too many specific synergies with all of them. Luck Be a Landlord also had a lot of specific synergies, but in general, a lot more items were more easily synergetic with others, while in Ballionaire, you have some items that only do something if you have a coin that was deployed, and only that coin also is holding an item, then something triggers, and you're like, okay, got it. So, like, this is literally useless for me with the build I'm going for. If I'm going for, like, a water droplet build, then coins are useless, food is useless. There's so many things that are just completely useless because they don't do anything unless you have that very specific thing. So I kind of wish that some of these items were a little bit more broad, or at least have more broad items that can be used in multiple builds. Because effectively, yeah, I think a lot of things can be a little confusing and a little too specific. I don't know how much more interesting you can make boards, because again, it doesn't really matter which board you're playing. If you're going for a particular build, generally it's just gonna work out. I don't know. It's good. It's good. Next up, we've got Bing in Wonderland. This is a fairly traditional 2D action roguelike. First off, visually, it's pretty unique in the way that it almost feels like watercolor, I forgot how you call it. That's kind of cool. It can be a little confusing, and it can feel a little dull with some of the enemies you can find throughout the game. But basically, this is a game that really prioritizes just fun, goofy action gameplay. You have a character, you can choose different weapons. Each weapons play pretty differently from one another. You can have a bow, you can have an axe, you can have harp. All of them have completely different movesets. The movesets are not super complicated. There's a really unique dash mechanic where instead of just dashing, you throw your hat. And once it's thrown, you can press the dash button again, or the hat throw button again, to dash to it and have invincibility framed the entire duration. Now, depending on how far your hat is, you might go much further and be more immune the entire time. That inherently is a very unique and simple dash invulnerability mechanic that I have not really seen many games utilize, and I think that's really cool. There's also a really cool concept of when enemies lose their shield. In a lot of games, when they lose their shield, they're a little stunned, and then you have extra stuff. And here, when an enemy loses their shield, and every enemy can lose their shield, they become stunned, and you can have this cool little animation where everything gets dark, and you just jump on their head, and you just do a big area of effect. And that's part of the core of the mechanics of the game and the gameplay. It's a very fast-paced game where you're hitting things from afar, and then you're dashing from one area to another, and then one enemy right there is vulnerable, so you run to it so you can just jump on it and have invulnerability frames. It feels great. I love starting a run and from the start feeling just super cool and powerful, and I think that's why a lot of people like this game. Now, the game has a pretty heavy roguelite progression system, and the runs are very short, which, I think it makes sense with what they're trying to go for, because this game almost feels very old-fashioned Flash games, right? Which I think it does actually come from Flash games. I'm not too sure about that, but it has that vibe of it just being fast-paced, simple, quick, enjoyable. So the runs are, I think they're like 15-20 minutes long, and then you end with a boss fight, and the boss fights are pretty unique. Again, visually, there's nothing too crazy going on, I would say. Sometimes they're just bigger versions of a smaller enemy you find randomly, but their mechanics are pretty enjoyable. Basically, this game is just a bunch of levels. I think there's like 15 plus levels, and each of them, is a little different biome, different enemies. All the enemies are fairly similar from one another, but there are some variation, and you end it with a cool fight. And once you finish one of those runs, you hopefully unlocked the next one by beating the boss, and through that run, you've unlocked some meta progression, more stats, but you can also change characters, and you can fuse characters, and each character have, minor cool little effects. So the meta progression, it's simple. In terms of the roguelike elements, I think this is where the game probably suffers the most, is that throughout the run, you're not going to feel completely different from the start to the end. And luckily enough, again, the game has inherently great gameplay from the start, so it doesn't feel too bad. But you're going to find some boons, but the boons are just like additional things to add to what you were going to do anyway. Generally, they don't really tend to change how you're going to play the game, which is a choice, obviously. I don't expect every game to be like that. I know that that's what I like. There is a world where I wish that some of the things you could find throughout the actual run were more impactful to the actual gameplay, like mechanically, as opposed to just you were always going to be shooting anyway, so you can do that. There's a few items here and there, but I think the boons are pretty minimalistic. So generally, I would say that the roguelike elements are pretty minimal. The runs are pretty quick. It feels like a fairly straightforward, simple game that's pretty goofy, actually very goofy. You can eat food, and when you reach 100 food, you start pooping everywhere, and then that's a mechanic. So that's the vibe you can expect from a game like this. The visuals are nice. I think the biomes are great visually. I think the enemies, they look, very, very goofy and simple. Sometimes I look at something and I'm like, what is that, a bag? Is that what's supposed to be, like a little bag with feet? I don't know. It's a style. I actually like it. It's a good time. I really enjoyed my time with it. I didn't fully finish it yet, but I am planning on. I don't think it takes too long to get to the final world. I will say, this is the kind of game where I feel like the reason I want to continue playing is to see the next level. I don't see myself going back to then doing just to do new runs of another level I've already done. I don't feel like, again, the replayability is super high in this game. I think it's just a matter of just trying to finish all the levels. And in that regard, it's a little disappointing that some things you can unlock, such as new characters, are actually locked behind completing a specific boss with a specific item or like a specific weapon. And sometimes I missed that, so I finished that boss and then moved on. And then I realized, oh shoot, I can't actually unlock this character anymore because I should do this old boss with the hammer, which I don't want to do. It's something small, but again, in general, I think for me and for a lot of people, the best part of this game is just completing it, and once you've completed it, it was probably a very enjoyable time. So, Bing in Wonderland, yeah, I would give this game I think I'm gonna put Bing above Ballionaire. I think the gameplay is just really solid. Maybe it's because I also like Flash games. It kind of brings me back, but yeah, good game. All right, next up, we've got Blood Dome 99. This is another Horde-like, and this was one that was sent to the channel a few months ago. And yeah, I think this game, I felt like it definitely deserved a bit of recognition because I don't think many people know about this. So when I first played it, it was still in early access, and now I think it's fully released. It's just pretty straightforward in terms of it just being, you know, a traditional Horde-like. You're in the middle, you're just shooting around, and you have a dash, and that's about it. Now visually, I think this is going to be kind of up to debate. I actually love the visuals. This has this very old-fashioned TV look to it. And as you can see, the colors are very minimalistic. And I think that is kind of the point. One aspect that I think a lot of Horde-like struggle with is too much visual chaos that make it a little too hard to see what's going on and to be able to, you know, evade things. Here, your character is one color, your bullets is one color, blood is one color, enemies is one color. That's about it. And you can actually change those, there's quite a bit of accessibility options in this game too. Everything is very visually clear. It's really hard to get lost with what's going on, and I love that. Of course, that's just one aspect. How's the gameplay? The gameplay is super satisfying. You get into a run, you only choose from one of 3 weapons. They're always the same weapons to start off with. Later on, you can actually choose specific weapons. You kill enemies, and the more enemies you kill, the more money you get. The money is probably the most unique mechanic from a lot of other Horde-likes that I've seen. The idea is you kill enemies. By killing enemies, you get XP, but you also get money, and then you can spend money on upgrades. The more powerful the upgrade, the more money it will require. And the point of the game is to reach a certain amount of money. So you're like, wait a minute, you have to use money to get upgrades. The more expensive upgrades are the better ones, right? So you actually have to make a choice as what your priority is. Do you want to beat the game fast, or do you want to get upgrades? The longer you wait during the run, the more deadly the enemies are going to get, and the more you're going to get completely overwhelmed. This is a game where you can't beat the enemies in the long run, in my experience. Similar to Balatro, the game is going to catch up to you. So you actually have to make a decision as to how soon and how late you want to try to complete the run with the money mechanic, which is cool. It's something I haven't seen many games do, and I really respect the uniqueness of that mechanic. One thing that I'm not as much in love with is that when you've done a run in a Horde-like, you kind of love seeing stats and seeing like, oh, how well did I do? How many enemies I did? I mean, maybe not everybody. I love that. And in this instance, the only thing that matters is how fast you beat the run, not how much gold you got, which I get it. The whole concept is how fast can you beat the boss, but I kind of like the idea of also, you know, being rewarded for getting 10 million gold as opposed to the run before where you got 300. I kind of wish there was also a reason to just get as much money as possible because people like big numbers, including me. At the end of the run, I don't think there are many stats. I love stats. Which ability did more damage? I like to see how many things I've killed, how fast I was. But more importantly, yeah, how much damage did certain things do, because that kind of helps players kind of know whether they like a certain weapon and a certain item more than others. In Horde-like, it's very hard to estimate how good something is because there's so much going on the screen that, you know, was my rocket launcher as powerful as it looked? It does a big explosion, but did it actually have good DPS? Did it actually deal more damage than my machine gun? I think it should be a staple for Horde-likes to have a stats at the end to kind of give information to players so that they can, you know, just get more informed in a genre that is pretty simple, you know? So that's one thing I would probably love to have added. And while I do love the money mechanic, I wish they would go even further with it, because currently getting XP and getting money is pretty much the same. Killing something gets you money and XP, and that's pretty much the core of how you get money. There are certain boons that can give you more money, but I kind of wish there was more to it than that. I wish there was another mechanic that would push me to do something to get more money as opposed to just killing things, so that, you know, I could have more fun with the, oh, should I go fast or should I level up? Because I think there's something really, really cool about it, but currently it feels like it doesn't matter. Like, it feels like XP and money is the same. And actually, at the beginning, it was kind of hard for me to understand that whole concept. Later on, as you get more comfortable with it, and as you really understand it all, it makes sense. But I think I think there could be even more to that concept. One other aspect I think is great. I think a lot of Roguelikes really should try to go for is every time you do a run, you come back and you can unlock a bunch of stuff. Whether it's stuff in the hub, whether it's new items you can find later on. And this is a game where things don't just, like, you're not gonna find an item that only synergizes with certain things, so unlocking a bunch of new weapons doesn't feel bad in this instance. It just gives you more things to play with, and I think the roguelike elements in general are really cool and unique. Most of the most of these things that you find are not just like 20% attack speed, 15%, whatever. No, they tend to be more mechanical changes. For instance, if you get the B gun, then it's gonna unlock a bunch of unique upgrades for your B gun that you can encounter, such as, if you stop moving, you're gonna shoot a queen bee after 5 seconds. After you dash, you do that. If you take damage, this happens. There's a ton of unique upgrades for each of the guns if you have them equipped. And you find guns every 5 minutes, I think, throughout the gameplay, which is a cool system. Basically, you just don't always find a bunch of weapons. Every few minutes, the game gives you a weapon, and you have to choose it. You have to choose from a selection of 3. Again, you have to pay for it, so depending on how much money you have, you're going to get more powerful ones, or you want to save your money, which, again, really interesting concept. Once you get your gun, then you can find all these new upgrades for the gun when you level up, which is awesome. I think the dash also works quite well in this game. Once again, since things are very visual and things are pretty slow, all things considered, you can really easily kind of like swivel around enemies, and this is one of those Roguelikes that feels great to move. The controls are very simple, but they feel really cool. Generally, really enjoyed my time playing this game. I saw it when it was sent to the channel early on, and it was just this one level, and there wasn't too much going on. And now there's like 3 levels. There's an endless mode. There's a bunch of stuff. It's fun, and the music is great, and there's an awesome narrator that says, "Challenger, welcome, you are going to die." I love it. So honestly, Blood Dome 99, it's a Roguelike that doesn't like create something absolutely ridiculously out of there, but you don't always need that. If your game feels unique, just stands out in some way, that's good enough. And I think that this is one of them. Visually and mechanically, with the money system, it's fun. I wish there were even more things you could find during runs, unique events, maybe, unique little mini bosses, that kind of stuff. But that's just in addition to what it is. I would say that Blood Dome 99 is a solid B tier. Sorry, Ballionaire. Sorry. Nothing personal. Next up, we've got Cobalt Core. Oh man, Cobalt Core. So this is our first deck building turn-based roguelike. And it's a space-themed game where you're controlling a ship. You pretty much have different crew members that you can start with, each with their own little mechanics and cards that you can add to your deck. And then you just have individual fights throughout the run by basically having a certain amount of moves, and each of your cards lets you move your ship and also shoot and have unique mechanics. I love this game, and there's a few reasons why I love Cobalt Core. First off, the music. Oh my gosh, the music in this game is one of the best roguelike tracks I've ever heard, period. I love every single track of this game. I listen to it on my own, and if you haven't heard this soundtrack, you have got to. It is beautiful, it is super fitting, it's just wonderful. So first off, that immediately kind of hits me hard here as a musician. So yeah, lovely soundtrack. And obviously this is a deck building game that looks pretty different and noticeably seems to have some very specific, unique mechanics, understandably so, as you're controlling an entire spaceship that you're moving around and shooting using cards. That's not something you'll see every day. I think that generally the mechanics are fairly simple to understand, but can get very strategic. You'll have cards that let you move and shoot, but also it only depends on it's also dependent on where your ship's actual cannon is. You'll have unique actual mechanic depending on which character you play. Some mechanics have an overheat system where some cards are really powerful but have overheat. You'll have a character that shoots turrets that will shoot for you automatically. It's one of those games where inherently the core mechanics, it's not intuitive until you start playing. So I would say that in general, it's a bit trickier to fully comprehend at first if you're not used to these kinds of games. But if you're used to playing deck building games and turn-based games, then I think that it should make sense fairly quickly. Some characters are more complicated than others. I think some characters are less fun than others. But in general, I would say that there is great replayability depending on the ship that you're going to be using, as well as the crew you're going to be finding. And throughout the run, you're going to be finding some awesome roguelike elements. I actually think the roguelike elements are fantastic in this game. You'll have different relics, obviously, like most of these, like a lot of these turn-based games. You know, passive effects that will always trigger throughout your run. There's a bunch of different events and different encounters. One thing I think is awesome in this game are the encounters. It feels like every single one of them tell a story. And I think that's one of the coolest aspects of it. And I probably already said that with the music, so this game has a lot of cool aspects. But the vibe of this game is fantastic. The story is great, and you can't, like, if you're really into this game, you're gonna really love completing a run. The game pushes you to beat the run so that you can get to the end and unlock a memory of one of your crew members, which gives you more lore. And the game is pretty emotional in some aspects. It feels just very homey. It's very immersive, especially with the music, and unlocking a lot of these memories from your crew members gives so much love to the game. Not to mention that a lot of the enemies, sometimes you'll have conversations with them, and they all have unique mechanics. They all feel like completely unique encounters. I really think they did a really good job with every fight feeling unique and interesting and having cool strategies you have to adapt to. Now, obviously, if you continue playing this game for a while, you're gonna find everything and you're gonna lose a little bit of that, you know, joy of just discovering new events and everything, but I think it takes a while to get there. Honestly, this game has a lot of content. Once you get to the final boss, I think that final boss is a little underwhelming, all things considered, compared to a lot of other things, without getting to spoilers. I wish there were different possible final bosses depending on certain things. But other than that, I mean, gosh, I really fell in love with this game. I think it did everything very well. I think it has great replayability. I think some characters are are not as enjoyable as others. Some character combinations are pretty unique. Yeah, I mean, overall, if you like deck building games, if you like the spacey feeling, I mean, like if you like FTL, you know, and you want a unique twist on a deck building game with fantastic music, then I would definitely recommend trying Cobalt Core. It is just fantastic. Now, whether it's an S tier or not, it's probably a low S tier, high A. I'm going to put it as a high A for now, because S tier are really like my favorite games of all time, and I have many of them. I have many games on my Steam library, so I love Cobalt Core. I'll have to think about whether it deserves S later on. Next up, we've got Crown Trick. Crown Trick is a board-based, turn-based roguelike. Probably didn't say that correctly, but you get the idea. And yeah, basically you are a princess that falls asleep, and when you fall asleep is when you get into this whole fantasy world, and you have to go through an entire run, beat the boss, come back out, get some meta progression, rinse and repeat. You get the gist of it. This one caught my attention because visually I thought the game looked really unique and really had a nice sense of kind of adventure just from the looks of it. I thought that the trailer did a really good job at showcasing a lot of cool looking bosses and biomes that felt like you were in this large adventure and like a big with a bunch of like unique dungeons. And that is definitely the case. This game is really cool in terms of the content of the level design, the monster design, the enemies, all the stuff you're going to be finding and facing. feels like a grand adventure. And I think that's probably the best part of this game. It has a clear progression where you start, you have to beat a certain level. Then when you beat that level, you have to finish 3 levels. And then once you've beaten those 3 levels, you have to beat another 3 levels. I kind of forgot the whole actual progression system, but it kind of reminded me of a game like Curse of the Dead God, where there's randomly generated runs and you're going to be facing random stuff, but there is still a clear progression. There is an end goal to this game that you cannot reach on your first time around, because every time you reach the end of a particular run, you're going to be fighting the specific boss of that realm, and then you're going to be unlocking new stuff. So this game definitely did a really good job at giving me this big sense of adventure. Something that is pretty hard to do in independent games, because, you know, that requires a lot of content. It requires a lot of work to just have multiple biomes, multiple final bosses, multiple things to do and to look forward to. The meta progression is pretty minimalistic in this game. I kind of wish it was a little bit more interesting, but overall, it's pretty fun. Now, let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay is okay, in my opinion. You know, it has a lot of mechanics. It's one of those games where you just look at it and you're like, okay, well, it looks pretty simple, but they just have a bunch of little unique mechanics in there that are, you know, specific to the game. So, for instance, every time you move, everybody moves. You know, it's turn-based. But you can also use a dash ability, which is a blink, which gives you a free movement. And that free movement is extremely powerful, naturally, because you can teleport wherever you want in a pretty wide radius for free. And considering that everything is turn-based, that gives you an extra turn with an extra movement teleportation. It's so powerful. And that blink regenerates every room. And you have like 3 or 4 of them, and you can get them more. So basically, the whole game is surrounded around that blink ability. And I think inherently, the blink ability is just so strong that it kind of screws a little bit with the overall balance of a lot of things in this game. Even though there's a lot of weapons, a lot of enemies, a lot of different things to encounter, the gameplay loop is pretty consistently the same, where you're going to be moving, and when an enemy is going to do an attack, you're just going to teleport away and get a free attack, and then you move, and then you're going to see an attack, you're going to teleport away and you're going to do an attack. It's a little dull in that regard for a lot of the encounters. Now, the bosses can be a little different, and some of the bosses have really, really cool mechanics. There's an entire chessboard boss where obviously, you know, all the pieces can move like chess pieces, which is really cool and unique. Finding all these bosses and understanding their mechanics is really enjoyable. I think the different weapons you find are kind of... They're cool. It's cool to have more, you know, roguelike stuff in there, but inherently I think that a lot of them are... kind of feel similar from one another. There's nothing too crazy. Some of the relics you can find are pretty unique. You know, there's a lot of attention to, you know, element damage and stuff like that. So, for instance, you're going to be finding mini-bosses. And one cool aspect of this game is that all the mini-bosses you can then convert as a spirit buddy that's going to give you some unique abilities that you can play with. You're going to have 2 of them at all time during your run, and depending on which of these mini bosses you encounter, or the ones that you have saved up, or I think you can choose some from your saved ones, you're gonna have these abilities. Now, the thing is, that's cool that you're gonna have, you know, that you can change those abilities and that you have new abilities every now and then. But I've kind of realized that, you know, if you like one of them, you're probably just gonna always have it. And if you have like some poison stuff, you're always gonna go for the 2 poison guys. Some of them feel way more underwhelming than others. I think they're a little unbalanced. I think overall there are some balanced tweaks that I would do in this game. The idea is really cool of these spirit mini bosses giving you abilities. I like the concept. But I think they could play even more with it in a way where you're kind of forced to switch around with others. Because currently, if you just start with one you really like, you're probably just going to stick with it the entire run. At least in my experience, I didn't think there was much strategy to changing it. I kind of wish they would give you like an upgrade if you were to change, so you can, you know, play around with more stuff. Overall, I think the game kind of inherently struggles with a bit of the gameplay, in my opinion. Even though it is fun, once you start playing it more and more, you realize that it's fairly repetitive and it can feel a little unbalanced. And also, there's something I really don't understand in this game that I really wish was done differently from the start, which is that most of the abilities from enemies, they show you they show you whether like, oh, like in one turn there's going to be a big explosion here, or one, like in 2 turns all this entire area is going to explode, right? You can kind of see you can see enemy predictions. You can see what enemies are going to do. Sometimes I don't understand why that is the case. That kind of blows my mind, honestly. Some bosses, like 80% of their moves, it's like coming to you and it's like, ooh, big charge attack, and you're like, oh, move out of the way. And then sometimes you just move and it immediately shoots something without predicting it. And I genuinely thought that I was missing a mechanic. I didn't understand, like maybe I misunderstood why that was like maybe like every single time you're in front of an enemy they do that and that's just part of the core. But no, some enemies predict attacks, some don't. And man, when you die because just a random character or a boss just does an ability instantly that just kind of kills you, and there's the Poseidon boss predicts all your like it shows every like prediction attacks, you know, like it's gonna throw something, a trident at you, it's gonna do an explosion. But if you are next, if you're in front of the Poseidon, like even from far away, you just move there without the Poseidon like showing any sign it's gonna attack, it will charge at you, stun you, and then like do 3 attacks on you. And I died to this twice, and it felt terrible. And I was so confused about it for a game that has so much going on and that's really about strategy. I thought that kind of ruined a lot of the strategy. Personally, I was very disappointed by that. I actually do think that kind of did hinder a lot of my experience. I kind of wished it was either or, not half and half, because it didn't make much sense to me. Also, the runs are quite long, which is cool in one aspect, but when you die from something that you could not predict unless you knew the characters, and again, one of the cool things that there's so much in this game that there's a lot of enemy variety, but that means that, you know, if you're gonna be hit by an enemy that doesn't predict an attack because you were supposed to know their moveset, doesn't feel as great, which is a shame because I think this game had a ton of potential and could have been a fantastic strategy game if the blinks were less powerful, if there was more reason to switch like spirits, and if they kind of went one or the other for like in terms of attack, which is just a shame because again, this game has a lot and is a great adventure overall. I didn't finish it because honestly I died to just certain bosses that did things instantly that just felt very unfair, didn't make me want to do another 1-hour run. So I'm sad because I want to see the ending. I love this. I think they did a good job with the story, the characters, and the world building and the enemies. It's great. So I'm kind of like conflicted on this one, but unfortunately in its current state, and again, this is a fully released game, but with just some of the decisions they made for the gameplay, I'm unfortunately gonna have to put this as a low B, even though I can see a world where this could have been a high A if some of those little things were tweaked. Next up, we've got Darkest Dungeon OG. Now, this is the one and only re-review on this tier list. I did actually rate this game in my original tier list about 1.5 years ago, and I want to come back to it. Basically, back then I give it a B because I thought it was a little too punishing. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I want to come back on this and really drastically change this this rating. If you who don't know, Darkest Dungeon is kind of a staple in for a lot of people in the roguelike world. This is a turn-based dungeon crawler roguelike with a really unique hardcore death mechanic where when someone dies, they're permanently gone, which doesn't make sense in the context of roguelikes because you always die, you always start over. But this is a game where actually the progression is not really roguelike related. You're going to be building your character, you're going to be doing specific missions, and at the end of the mission, you're going to keep those characters, they're going to keep their abilities and everything, and like their levels and everything. You can use them for hours and hours, like you can use them for 100 hours. But eventually, if you go into another mission with that character and they just die, you lose them permanently. And that's something you don't see very often in roguelikes, and well, there's a few reasons. First of all, it's really, you know, pretty punishing to just have a character get somewhere and then just have die randomly, right? And in this game, there's a lot of luck involved too. So, ooh, you're combining permadeath and luck. Ooh, that sounds rough. But the thing is that this is the point of the game. It's not fully luck. Obviously, there's a whole lot of strategy. There are a few things where you can miss an attack and you can get crit. And numbers are really impactful in this game. Getting crit can be half of your health instead of a quarter. So clearly that's pretty meaningful. But that's really is the whole concept of the game, is being able to deal with the worst. It's about not giving up even in the worst case scenario. It's all psychological in this game too. There's a whole stress meter. And if you get up to your max stress, they might start going crazy, like anxious or abusive, for instance, like that kind of stuff. And you have to deal with that. And that whole psychology aspect is really interesting and really unique. And so you start really caring for a lot of these characters, or maybe you shouldn't because they're gonna die. Sorry to spoil the situation here. And it's a very, very hard and punishing game. But there's a great sense of adventure in this one as well, as clearly you're trying to get to the very end, the darkest dungeon, and beat the final boss, which takes some time and takes some dedication. But the idea of just dying and repeating is really something that very few games really want to do, because yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. And originally that's how I felt. I thought, like I was playing and then like I would die. I'd be like, I'm done with this. But then when I started again and I really looked at more people talking about this game and realizing how impactful it was for the roguelike community, because this game is almost 10 years old, I think, at this point, maybe even more, I forgot. But I've realized that if you really take this game with a different mindset and you realize that, it's all about continuing and holding on to certain characters, but utilizing them and then switching with different there's a lot you can do in this game, and there's a lot of strategy, and the more knowledge you have, the more you can really benefit from it and really, feel rewarded for it. And killing bosses in this game feels incredible. It feels so worth the adventure and the time commitment to get there, because obviously you can lose a lot for taking on a boss. But this game, bosses are not simple, and if you might lose your entire favorite team on the boss. That feeling of getting to a boss and okay, here we go, and missing an attack, getting critted, it's so nerve-wracking, and then you beat it and you feel so amazing. That feeling of beating a boss in this game is similar to the first time I would have beaten bosses in Souls games when I was getting started in Souls games. It's so rewarding, and it's just such a big relief. Every time you get into an adventure, you have so much to keep track of, and it really feels like, all right, guys, good luck. And that aspect is amazing. Not to mention the music is fantastic, very nerve-wracking, very stressful, very dark. The art is great, and yeah, fantastic narrator. Obviously, this game is quite well known for the narration. There's a narrator who's just pretty much talking about everything that's going on. It's so immersive. I love it. So I'm going to bump Darkest Dungeon from originally being a mid B to a very, very high A tier. And these two, I mean, that's a tough one, but I think I'm actually gonna put Darkest Dungeon as a high A tier. Some people would put it as S, understandably so. But again, the punishing aspect is still a lot, and I have never finished this game, and I don't know if I could see myself committing to trying to finish it, but it requires a lot, in my opinion, so I'm going to leave it as a high A for me. Maybe it's skill issue, but in general, I would say that it is a fantastic game that I just felt I needed, a correction in its rating from the original time. Next up, obviously, we now have Darkest Dungeon 2. This game is actually a bit controversial in the community for a few interesting reasons. So this obviously is the sequel to the game we just talked about, Darkest Dungeon 1, and they decide to take a bit of a different approach to the first one. Some people may say that's a good thing, some people may say that's a bad thing. I think most people think it was a bad thing. Basically, they kept a lot of the vibe, they kept a lot of the ideas behind Darkest Dungeon, but they took away the hardcore mechanic that we just talked about. You still have meta progression, you still, you unlock things as you complete runs, but it is truly run by run. Every time you start a new run, you're gonna have new characters, you're gonna have everything new other than your meta progression. It's more of a traditional roguelike experience in that regard. And I think a lot of people were really disappointed by that aspect, and I can understand. Some people would say that one of the best parts of Darkest Dungeon 1 is the hardcore mechanic. Naturally here, if I fight a boss and I die, it doesn't feel as stressful and as intense as the first game. And that was definitely a choice. Now, the gameplay is pretty much exactly the same, I would say. Obviously, like, you know, the mechanics, you're gonna have different abilities, different enemies and stuff like that, but I think mechanically the gameplay is the same, which is great because the original gameplay was solid. The dungeon crawling aspect obviously is gonna be different, and this one is quite different. Instead of you traversing through a dungeon, you're just on a carriage, right? Is that how you call it? Like, well, one of those horse things there. It kind of just goes automatically. You can move it left to right just to grab certain items on the road, but ultimately it's just you press a button, you wait until the next thing happens, and then you can choose which direction to go, which is much more minimalistic. To be honest, like, the dungeon crawling aspect mechanically there wasn't too much to it either, but you felt like you were more in control in the dungeon crawling aspect. I like some aspects of the horse system here. I don't like some as much. I like both, to be honest. Moving the carriage sometimes can feel a little wonky, just control-wise, but that doesn't really matter. You can still choose which direction to go, and the things you will encounter, there's a ton of unique events. This game has a lot of content, naturally. I mean, the first game also had a ton of content. Each run does feel pretty different depending on what you find. I can definitely see that, you know, it's missing a little bit of this, you know, like, stressful, like, feeling of having to make sure you don't die as much. It's definitely a different feel, and I think that's why this game didn't do as well as I expected it to do. I think if you really forget about Darkest Dungeon 1, and I know it's hard to do, right? And you really take this game at face value as what it is, I think people would love this game, because I think it's really, really good. It's a really solid roguelike. The gameplay is great, the characters are great, and I didn't even talk about probably my favorite aspect of this game. I think this game's animation are some of the best I've ever seen in any roguelikes, period. Some of the 2D sprites in the 3D environment, when they attack, beautiful, like, smooth animations. It is so amazing to watch. Like, every attack feels so good. And even here, like, it's so unique, it's so distinct. I think it honestly improved from the first game, which, again, the first game was a while back, and I think they did such a fantastic job visually that by itself is so immersive to me. I absolutely love it, and the music is still fantastic. They also try to give more lore and importance to individual characters, even though it's funny because on one end, you're gonna get more lore and more story on these characters, but on the other, you're not gonna be as attached to them because this is not a hardcore system where you're going to be sticking with one for a very long time. So it's interesting, you can just choose which one you want from the start, but it's not the same person. You'll find some quests that will permanently unlock abilities to particular characters. Well, like here, in this instance, like, it kind of like shows like a part of their life, and it's like a little mini game that also gives some lore to these characters. Sometimes you'll just get the narrator telling you what's going on instead of playing a whole mini game. But it's cool. You get to see some cool little unique puzzles that, you know, weren't necessary to be added in the game, but they still did it. There's also a unique kind of relationship system in this game, which I think could have been a nice addition to the first one as well, where you can actually build relationship like better relationship between each character depending on what happens. It's a little confusing. Overall, I would say this game is much more complicated than the first one in terms of its mechanics. It did take me a little bit to understand everything, and it was a little annoying at first to really understand all the new additions made to it, because I would say that they kept all the original mechanics, they just added a lot more. And in general, like, if you look at the tutorial, my goodness, the tutorial is long. There's so many pages. Like, at least it's all accessible, but it's great. The UI also I don't love. Sometimes a window opens and I press escape, it doesn't work. I have to press right click, and sometimes there's multiple windows open. I think they look great. I think it all makes sense, but just like controlling the UI is weird. You'd have to play it to see it for yourself. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one in that regard. It's not a huge deal, but it's something to note. I like the fact that you unlock a lot of stuff in the meta progression. There's a lot to unlock, but also they all use the same currency. Usually, I'm kind of an advocate for using the same currency to make things, you know, less complicated in games. But in this instance, there's currency to unlocking items permanently, which doesn't make you stronger, right? And making you stronger. They use the same currency. A lot of games do that. This is just my own opinion, but I'm not a huge fan of games that do that in general, because you have a choice. Either you become stronger in order to complete runs more frequently and go further, or you unlock more things which make you weaker, but you have more fun by finding more items. I don't want to unlock more things. I want to win more runs. So I'm just going to upgrade my characters, but now I'm just always finding the same items. Do you think there's a lot of items and a lot of content in there, so that in this instance it didn't feel too bad? But I still wish that there was maybe a second currency, one for unlocking things and one for your own permanent improvements. But overall, I really want to talk about this game because I think that inherently Darkest Dungeon 2 is a really, really good game that not everybody gave it a good shot, purely because it took a kind of like a bold move of leaving the hardcore mechanic and the dungeon crawling aspect of the first game that a lot of people loved. Understandably so, it is a different angle, one that some might not enjoy. I think it's okay, but if you can really try to just not think of the first game as much and really take it by itself, it's a really good game. I think Darkest Dungeon definitely deserves more than it's what it's been getting for. So I'm going to put it as a very solid A tier on my end. Next up, we've got Dicefolk. Dicefolk is a deck building roguelike. You have a team of 3 creatures that you can use strategically in a turn-based fashion, and you can change them and, you know, improve them. This is our first dice roguelike. More and more dice games we see in these days. It's just another, it's just another way of just having unique twists on some of these deck building / turn-based roguelikes. What definitely caught my attention was, once again, the visuals. As you probably know by now that I'm kind of a sucker for a lot of the vibe and visuals of for a lot of these games. And I think that this game had a really cute looking art style, but also seemed to kind of take itself fairly seriously with the character involved and with the whole story behind it. The gameplay is pretty unique and pretty fun. It has its own gameplay from the very start, and I like that. It feels different. You're gonna have 3 monsters, and you can always choose which one is going to be at the front fighting the enemy. But of course, the positioning of all these chimeras, I think what they're called, also impact certain abilities. So it's all a matter of being able to switch position and like manipulating enemy and ally position and attacking. And the dice come in a way where basically you have multiple dice that you're gonna be throwing at every turn, and depending on the face of the dice, that's the action that you're allowed to do during this turn. So for instance, you might throw your dice and you're gonna get an attack here and a left side movement. And then you have the opponent that also has its own dice, and you can choose which dice goes when, including the enemy. So basically, it's all up to you strategically to plan ahead as to which die you want to be using at all times, and that's kind of the core mechanic. So it's cool. It's there's definitely some luck involved depending on the dice that you're going to be landing on. But overall, all the faces of the dice usually have some benefit. Most of the time, you're not going to get screwed by throwing 3 dice and getting nothing and no attacks. You're almost always going to get an attack, and the enemies also are going to have a lot of weak die in general. It's a pretty forgiving game. It's pretty easy, in my opinion, once you really get to understand a lot of the mechanics. I think the roguelike elements in this game are great. Obviously, being able to see all those different chimeria, something like that. All of them have their own ability, and obviously can really change the whole strategy you're going to be going for during runs. So for instance, you can have a chimera where every time you move, give your left chimera more attack, One chimera is like, oh, you attack 3 times, so you're like, ah, well, if I get this one that gives attack to the other chimera, that's really good, so I'm going to try to go for moving a lot. You're going to have a chimera that does something like, oh, every time he takes damage, something occurs, or you give yourself spikes, or... So basically, it's all about finding 3 chimeras that can synergize with each other, while also finding unique items to add to them to even benefit more from like unique strategies. So you can really build some cool strategies, and ultimately, when you get those strategies going, it feels great. So I would say that the roguelike elements are very satisfying in that regard. One feedback I would give in that regard, though, is that the game does take a bit to get going, like, because you're always going to start with just like temporary creatures that you do not care for, and you're just trying to find your first chimera to get a build going. So it always starts really slow in general, which I wish was a little different in that regard. And then once you find your strategy, it feels great, but then there's no reason to change strategy. So if you find like your 3 favorite, like 3 chimeras that really work together with each other by like the second biome, then you're just going to be doing the same exact strategy throughout the rest of the run. So there's a really nice sweet spot in this game where once you get that strategy going and you really nailed that nice little synergy, it feels awesome, and you're going to be doing for multiple runs, for multiple battles, and it's awesome. It's really enjoyable, but it's quite repetitive in that regard as well. So this game really has a sweet spot that I really do enjoy, that I wish was more expanded, as opposed to just having the beginning being too slow and the end being the same after you found your synergy. There's a lot of unique events you can find. You can find little berries that will improve your chimeras. You can find equipment. You can find shops. You can find new dye. The game has a lot of content. Ultimately, I think that the game is really, really solid. It's just the gameplay being slow at the start and repetitive at the end. Outside of that, I think the vibe is great. The replayability is actually really great. Every run feels very, very different from one another because the chimeras feel completely different from one another. I would say that if you enjoy you know, these turn-based games, you like the vibe, like visually what's been shown here, and you want to try a pretty unique experience in terms of dice roguelikes, then I'd say give this one a shot. I'm gonna give this one a B tier. Next up, right in queue with the music, we've got Diceomancer. Now, Diceomancer is that's an interesting game. Obviously, in the letter D category, we're gonna get a few dice games naturally. This is another deck building game that also uses dice, but there's not much dice going on here, as you might see right now, but we'll get to the dice portion. First off, the visuals. It's all hand-drawn. It's so unique. It is so hand-drawn. And it works so well for the vibe of this game, because it's not lazy hand-drawing. There's also animation that goes with it that is just honestly so wonderful, so enjoyable. All the cards have unique animations with them. Not all of them, but like most of them. Like it's awesome. And once again, I think that overall there is a great sense of immersion with the fact that your entire screen is just in the area that you're fighting all of these creatures. So it just feels like you are that person dealing with like actually using those cards, and the fact that it's like a first-person angle and you actually get to see your hands do these things is very immersive and it's very cute. I adore the vibe of this game. Immediately, that was already a thumbs up from the very start. The unique aspect of this game, because basically the gameplay is pretty straightforward. You have cards that do certain things. Some cards have dice, you know, like, oh, deal 1d6 of damage, 1d20 of damage, or something like that. It's cool, you know, like you have some cool mechanics using dice within cards that I think is pretty interesting. But that's not where this game really kind of took a left turn for me. Where it took a left turn is a very specific mechanic that seems very specific, but actually kind of like dictates the entire game, which I forgot how it's called, and I'm sure it's already been shown in the trailer. But basically, you have the ability to pretty much turn any number on the screen, whether it's on the UI or anywhere, into a D6. You can just roll a D6 and just change, there you go, the one die. You can change any value on anywhere using a D6. The possibilities are just endless with this concept. And at first, when I first saw that in the trailer, I was like, in the tutorial, I was like, there's no way this successfully balanced that. Like, there's no way you can balance around it. Like, what? You can change any number? So, yes, you can change even the health of the opponent. And the way that they actually get around that is that opponents have multiple health bars. That way you can't just, like, but right now the 18 here, you can just roll a D6 and turn it into whatever the D6 gives, right? But most enemies will have multiple bars, so you can't just kind of constantly cheese every single thing that you come across naturally. But I was kind of blown away by that because it sounds like a balanced just nightmare designing a game like this. Honestly, I think they did a pretty good job. I do think that once you know how the mechanic works, you can obviously naturally kind of exploit it pretty well. It doesn't feel like you're cheating because, again, a lot of the game mechanics are centered around that. But I do believe that I got to understand the mechanic pretty quickly, and I think I beat almost every single one of my run from the very, very, very start because I took my time and understood, you know, like I really looked at all the different possibilities. So if you spend a lot of time, the game is going to reward you by, you know, having you have a lot of possibilities, and like you can really be creative with how you want to use your die. So that's awesome. Other than that, I think the cards are pretty unique as well. Some cards get really complicated. I do think that even though the game looks pretty simple visually, there's definitely a lot of complexity in a lot of the cards in their design. So I would say that this is not a deck building game that I would recommend new players. I mean, unless you want to. Again, it's a really fun, unique game. But it is fairly complex. There's a lot of replayability in the fact that you can start by pretty much combining classes. Pretty much, I think you can like have a red deck and a blue deck and a purple deck, and together they create this. So there's some replayability from the start, the customization from the start. There's a lot of unique events, a lot of enemies. Yeah, there's a lot to do in this game. I think they did a pretty good job with making sure that you can continuously play new runs and have fun, unique builds almost every time. I do think there are some balance issues kind of inherently, but I think with the massive restriction they gave themselves by having the roll the chosen die, I think they did a really good job overall. So I would say visually, vibe-wise, gameplay-wise, this game is really solid and is something that I haven't really seen be done before. Not only with the dice mechanic, which again is crazy that they did that, but also visually, it's super charming, and I think Diceomancer deserves a very solid spot in the A tier, probably above Archon. Quite a few A ratings so far. Next up, we've got Dungeon Clawrer. Right? I think that's how you pronounce it. And before even talking about this game, already thumbs up for the pun there, because it's all about having a claw. So this is a claw machine roguelike. I've always been saying that basically every single idea of any game that exists in real life is going to end up being a roguelike. You know, we've got poker roguelike, we've got the Peggle roguelike. You've got all of them, and this is the Claw Machine roguelike. Cool. How is it? It's fun. You choose a character that has pretty unique abilities, and then you just add more and more stuff to the whole claw machine, and you just try to grab them, and you just release them upon enemies. And it's a turn-based roguelike, because you have 2 claws every turn that you just drop and grab stuff, and then you see stuff happening, and then the enemies attack. It's ridiculous. I love it. Also, this, I mean, for the trailer having a stop-motion trailer for no reason, gosh, it's such a wonderful world of video games we live in, isn't it? One thing I do want to note, this is our first early access game of this list. There are a few early access games that we'll be talking about, and I'm just going to quickly say that early access games are, you know, meant to have more stuff in the future, but there's still games that you can pay on Steam to play. So for me, as long as there's a price behind it, I think it is worth reviewing in its current state, while noting that the game may improve in future. And for that matter, a lot of these games that are on this list actually changed ratings recently for me because I replayed them and realized that, oh my gosh, they're actually now fully released and they're much more enjoyable. So all these early access games may get much better ratings later on. In any case, I'm going to review them in their current state. So this game in early access currently is very enjoyable. There's not much to talk about in terms of the core gameplay. Obviously, you can see for yourself. You get what you know what you get. It's all about the satisfaction of pulling things with a claw machine, and I think the actual roguelike elements are really cool too. They did a pretty decent job making this a pretty enjoyable game outside of just the haha, it's a claw machine roguelike, right? There's a lot of things you can add to the machine that are going to synergize with each other depending on each character may have different items they might want to add to the machine. And you can also find different claws. Some claws are much more powerful than others. Now, if I were to talk more about specifics, there are definitely some things the game can improve on, in my opinion. First off, I think the game, and I don't know how they could potentially fix this if they are planning on, but when you do get a good grab of a claw, it feels great. But when you don't, it feels terrible. And the game is not, it's not particularly hard, honestly. It's not like it's too hard. It's just, man, missing a good claw is just such a waste of time, and it takes a long time to get to the next claw, and it just feels really terrible considering there's not a crazy amount of strategy behind how you're supposed to grab things. You're kind of just going above and you're just letting it go, and then you can pull it back early. You can definitely get comfortable with the mechanics and the control, but there's a limit to it, like after all, the items can be very loose, and you can always drop them fairly easily. When you grab everything, it feels awesome. I do think that the unique claws that you can encounter are just super satisfying. They're a little overpowered, but they're so satisfying that I kind of wish there was an in-between where the normal claw, you could potentially upgrade your normal claw, because currently this claw is always going to be exactly the same, just always this. That's all you get from that claw. So I wish there was more you could do with that claw, and then the unique claws are good by themselves. So maybe upgrading that claw would be something I would add, but honestly, right now the enjoyment I've had was unlocking a new character, trying them out, being like, ooh, that's a really cool concept. I mean, I should definitely go for metal items, and then you just add them to the grain, and then you throughout your exploration, you find mini bosses, you find little events, and then you fight the final boss. The final boss is always the same, and unfortunately, with how the game is structured right now, if you have a particular build that's really good against the final boss, good for you. But if you had a particular build that just didn't go with the final boss's mechanics, then it's going to be harder. In a way where basically, since it's always the same and the boss has a very specific mechanic, the final boss doesn't feel very broad. It feels a little too specific sometimes, and it can be a little punishing or a little too easy depending on what you ended up going for during the run. So I hope they bring more uniqueness to the final boss. I will say something that's really cool is the sound design. That claw machine sound when it moves, it's like ASMR in my ears. It is just like I can't do it, but it's so satisfying and so enjoyable. I love it. It really feels great when you can have a bunch of stuff and then it moves and you hear that sound. They did a really good job in that regard. The music is pretty cool too, and I think the unique relics you can find and upgrades are pretty good. I think this is a game that could definitely get more content. I also just hope they do kind of find a way to make the core gameplay a bit more sophisticated with the claw. I think if they could add just a little bit more with that original claw, then I could see myself really continuing to play. But currently, this game does what it's trying to do very well, which is a claw machine roguelike. And it's very enjoyable. I really had a great time with this game. Also a really good game for the Steam Deck if that's something you're into. So I'm gonna put this as a pretty high B tier, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where this game is gonna go once it leaves early access. Next up, we've got Emberward. Emberward combines two cool, unique game mechanics into one. It's a tower defense game with placing Tetris blocks. Not something you would expect to hear every day. I think there's been a lot of attempts at doing tower defense games in roguelikes, and I do think that tower defense games inherently are also a genre that is pretty hard to combine with roguelikes, because tower defense games are very slow pace, and generally roguelikes, you want to be able to go fast so you can improve more and get more content as you're going forward in your runs. And tower defense games just don't really do that in general. Now, I've played maybe 5-6 tower defense games, roguelikes, and I was definitely curious about this one. This is currently in early access, and I started playing it fairly early on in its development, and I will say this is one of those games that I think has definitely improved through the early access so far. I had a lot of issues that I was planning on talking about when I was considering making a tier list a few months ago about including this game. But honestly, they've really been improving a lot of stuff. So congratulations on that regard. But let's talk about it. So basically, you're in a big map, and you choose a particular map. And once you get into this map, you're going to be placing blocks to create the path of where enemies are going to be going, trying to go to your Emberward. We're trying to do a crazy long loop for these enemies. Obviously, enemies are going to be arriving from different areas, so it's kind of tricky. It's a cool little, like, puzzle almost. And on top of that, you've got the tower defense mechanic, where you're going to be placing particular towers that you find throughout your run that sometimes require a certain amount of spaces, and then depending on where they place them, there's going to be a lot of spots that are going to have like improvements. So like if you have an ice improvement on a block, you can place an ice tower there. They're going to get much stronger, and you're also going to obviously be finding a lot of relics, and all these relics are going to be synergetic with specific towers. So sometimes like fire towers are not going to do this, and like electric towers are going to be triggering something if poison occurs, which I love. I love when roguelike games really try to push aspects of, like combining certain things to create something new and unique, but it's still not restrictive to the point where it's unthinkable unless you're going for something very specific. Here, there's a lot of synergetic relics, but they're not too hard to go for, which is great. Originally, one of the big issues I had with this game a few months ago was that the relics were just too boring, and also were a lot about taking damage. If you are to take damage, blank happens. You're not supposed to take damage in this game. If you take damage, that's bad. And so in general, a lot of roguelikes I'm not a fan of if you take damage blank, unless taking damage is expected to occur a lot. And this is not a game you're supposed to take damage a lot. So I was not really happy with that. And I think they've reduced the amount of these relics, and I think that really did help with the roguelike elements. So I would say the gameplay is really enjoyable. There's two aspects to it that both, require specific strategies: where you place your towers, which towers you build, and how you're going to be creating this crazy maze for the enemies. Also, the visuals I think are pretty nice. I think some of the big creatures almost feel a little bit out of place sometimes. They're just so massive. But for a tower defense game, I think it has a pretty recognizable vibe, and I think it's pretty cool. In terms of the roguelike elements, like throughout the run, there's a few things that I'm not too sure how I feel about yet. First off, generally, when you look at tower defense games, and again, this is just an inherent issue with combining these two genres, tower defense games are about, setting up towers and getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger throughout the particular combat, and you want to get to the mid game of a tower defense game, right? So here, you're always starting over at wave 1 each level, and usually you don't want that in tower defense games. So what they did instead is that they made sure to give you a ton of resources very quickly. So instead of having that feeling of just getting stronger and stronger and stronger throughout like a long tower defense game like Bloons Tower Defense or Kingdom Rush, here there's only 6 waves and you're giving a lot of stuff very quickly. And that makes sense that they were going to do that, because otherwise either runs are going to last hours and hours and hours, or you're just never going to feel like your build gets super powerful, and that's not very enjoyable. So I think that's the right way of doing it, but I personally think that inherently it's just hard to make that always super fun. By the mid game, you're given so many blocks, and like my hand is always full, and you can always place more towers, but you're like whatever. It's like, it's one of those games where there's just constantly so much given to you because you're trying to get to that fun late game very quickly, that you're kind of being overwhelmed with like having so many towers to the point where I didn't really care too much. I was just placing things randomly, just clicking random upgrades. So I think there's a bit of a pacing issue within the levels. Even though I was kind of just placing things randomly by the late game, I was still winning runs pretty easily, even on the hardest difficulty. If you're used to tower defense games, then this game is not super hard, to be honest. But it is all about obviously making the right choices, right? If you make a good loop and a good labyrinth, and you have good synergetic towers, inherently you're probably going to be winning these pretty easily. That being said, there are also some cool aspects to the level. Obviously, since you're building all these levels, you're going to find some pretty cool restrictions. You know, some areas is gonna be frozen, and therefore you can't place certain blocks in certain places. When you start a level, you're like, okay, what's the plan? And the game gives you like a drawing tool, so you can try to plan ahead of what you want the trajectory of these monsters to be. I love that portion. I think it's awesome to have that. But by wave 5 or 6 on a 6-wave level, I'm just placing things randomly. So I kind of wish there was a little bit more to the late game of individual levels. Not to mention that the towers are pretty unique. They do some pretty cool, unique things, and some of them do require certain things, like certain areas and stuff like that. So I like that. But a lot of them, you know, you just place them and you just upgrade them and that's it. You don't really do much with your towers. That you can't really upgrade them. You can't really do anything too crazy with them. They're just there. You place them and then you can choose one of 2 upgrades, and that's it. I kind of wish that the end game of a level would not be as many towers, and would instead give me more upgrades per tower, just a way to spend more money, because currently there's no good way to spend a lot of money, and again, by the end, you just get so much money, you just don't know where to spend it on. Not to mention that the game sometimes, like, some monsters drop chests, and the chests just give you more money and more Tetris blocks, and you're like, gosh, I don't have the time or space for these Tetris blocks. My hand is completely full, but thanks. So would I have wanted to have longer levels, but the overall run is shorter, or keep it as is? I don't know. I don't know what would have been the solution to this problem, but I think with the inherent complexity of it, I think they did a pretty great job. This game is in early access again, so I wonder if they're gonna find a way to deal with these issues that I have. But overall, if you like tower defense games and you like this concept of building your own path and having to try to figure out ways, you know, to create these labyrinths, this kind of puzzly mechanic, I think this game is very enjoyable. The boss fights are pretty cool. The different levels are pretty cool. There seems to be a lot of content here with unique characters to start off with, some pretty cool roguelike mechanics, meta progression where you can upgrade, you know, your health, your damage, and stuff like that. Very straightforward stuff in that regard. Currently, I'm gonna place it right around here, and I could see this game potentially even getting to A if really they figure out a lot of the issues that I personally have. Next up, we've got Go Mecha Ball. This is a very fast-paced action shooter roguelike, where the unique gimmick here is that you're controlling a character that can form into like a little ball, and you can kind of dash from one area to another. Like, it, you know, what you see is what you get pretty much here. But you also have a gun, and you can kind of stop, like, you know, dash, like rolling around to kill some enemies. Now, obviously, the first thing that caught my attention in this game, the core gameplay looked very fun, and the visuals look very chaotic. So what do you think of this game? Well, I'm gonna be honest, I was a little disappointed with this game. I feel bad because I think there was a lot of potential with Go Mecha Ball, but I think that this game kind of fell short for me on a lot of little specifics that all accumulated into an experience that I just didn't fully connect with. The way it works is that you choose a character, you're gonna start your run, and then you're gonna be put into this big level, and you have to kill 3 waves of enemies to progress to the next level. Do this like 3-4 times, and then you go to a shop, and then you get to the boss, You do that another 2 times throughout 2 different worlds. Final boss, done. Pretty standard progression system, but inherently I was already kind of disappointed with the fact that the game really tries to have a focus on movement, and there's a lot of really cool like launch pads and like boosts and stuff like that. And during the tutorial, you have this long kind of like level. You just go and like you dash through some areas, and before bosses, they put this long like stretch of land where you just like dash from one area to another. But the gameplay does not have much of that. You're kind of stuck in this little room. Like, the room is fairly big, but I was kind of sad to not see them utilize more of the exploration aspect that I think could have been really entertaining with the movement of this game. Inherently, when you start playing this game and you have your gun and you start getting comfortable with dashing to enemies, it feels good, it's enjoyable, not to mention that the VFX are great. Again, visuals and VFX are really, really solid. The guns, there's just different guns, there's no way to upgrade them. Like, if you find a new gun throughout the run, it doesn't matter if you found it at the floor 1 or floor 3, it's just a different gun. If you like a particular gun, you're just gonna stick to it. There's no reason to change, at least to my understanding. I think basically a lot of the roguelike mechanics could have been fleshed out a bit more. I'm not saying that every game needs to have crazy roguelike mechanics, but I feel like here they kind of missed the opportunity to have some really interesting roguelike elements. The fact that, again, like all the guns are just always the same. Your character is almost always the same. Everything is pretty much always the same. And it's a shame because they tease you with potential roguelike stuff. The only unique things you're gonna find are different abilities. You're basically gonna find different abilities like a slam attack or grenades, right? But once again, that's it. There's nothing more than that. Like, that grenade is just gonna stick. It's just gonna be the same grenade every single fight, every single run. Once you complete a level, you get a choice of 3 upgrades. And these upgrades tend to be very generic, you know, deal a bit more damage. The grenade ability, which again you can equip, but you can only have max of 2, so sometimes when you have those upgrades, if you like your abilities and they offer you a new ability, it's completely useless. You have a little bit more health. When you dash, you deal a bit more damage. None of these upgrades are really gonna change much, and I can understand that the idea was not to change the core mechanics much because that's really the point of the game. But I don't know. I feel like they could have had a bit more originality with some of these things. Also, I think the core gameplay is good, but I still think there could have been even more to it. For instance, one of the abilities you can find, again, that's like one of the abilities, like the grenades and stuff like that, is when you jump high in the air, you can just slam down and do an area of effect. I honestly think that should have been a core mechanic in the game, because currently when you fly up, it feels great to like be flying and woo, you shoot and everything, but you can't go back down quickly, and I feel like that's almost a bit of a shame, because I wish I could go faster. Flying up feels a little bit awkward, at least to me. But again, this is one of those games where some people are just going to connect with that gameplay much more than I did. I did beat the game, and again, the game is really hard, I would say. I think a lot of people tend to agree with that. There's like no healing other than in the shop. If you take damage, you just take damage and that's it. There's no roguelite, like the only thing you unlock are just permanent things to add to your runs, which again, I don't think every game should have roguelite elements, right? But geez, in this one, this game is punishing. If you don't connect with the gameplay, it's gonna be really tricky. The enemy design and the boss designs are great, but again, just inherently, there's some of them are pretty hard to evade and very punishing. There's a particular ball that will follow you and dash towards you. Oh my gosh, I hate that ball so freaking much. Like, it's so hard to evade, and with everything going on, it's just a lot to keep track of. There's not enough rewards giving after, like throughout the runs. I think they could have given more for players to play around with as a roguelike. When you kill a boss, you get nothing. You kill a boss, you just get a little bit of health back. That's it. That's so sad. Give me a reward. You don't even get one of those things after killing a boss. Why? I wish they would at least give you an upgrade, right? And the last thing as well is there's some serious frame drop issues, and I've realized I made sure to check that out. I seem to not be the only one. Unless you have a crazy computer, you're gonna have some. You might have some pretty rough frame drops by the third world. I'm talking like like 4 or 5 frames per second sometime. It was really bad, and my computer can handle quite a few things here, so so that's something to keep in mind. I feel bad, I'm sad, and again, I do understand that, you know, if people just love the core gameplay, then I could imagine why people would love it. I think they could have gone deeper with the roguelike elements. I think they could have been a little kinder to new players with how hard it is, and potentially a little bit more of an exploration aspect because of how enjoyable it is to just roll around in your little ball. I kind of wish they kind of expanded on that a little bit more. So to me, Go Mecha Ball is going to be a C tier. Once again, C tiers are not just bad games, they just are not games for me, and I might have an expectation that was too high for this game. But yeah, if you think that you're gonna enjoy this kind of crazy gameplay, which again was very fun at first for me, then give it a try. But for me, Go Mecha Ball is a C tier. Next up, we got a big one. Hades 2. Hades 2, obviously sequel to very popular, successful action roguelike Hades 1, or just Hades, sorry. Yeah, this time around, you're playing as Melanoy, trying to save her family from the first game, pretty much, from Kronos. Hades 2 is currently in early access, and I've been following this game very closely. And for those of you who do not know, Hades 1, the early access, was such an important aspect of the game's development. This was a team that really did take a lot of the player feedback to create one of the greatest action roguelikes to date, in my opinion. Obviously, it's gonna be a lot to do a sequel of a game that was just this successful. So how is Hades 2 in its current state? I think it is fantastic. Now, I've already talked about Hades 2 in depth a few months ago. Obviously, things have changed, but I'm just going to reiterate that I think Hades 1 is one of my favorite action hack and slash roguelikes, and I think they did a really good job with Hades 2 so far, at least, at keeping, you know, the original feel of Hades 1 while still feeling like a sequel, not a DLC. I think they really did a nice blend of having a good reason for this to be a sequel. Melanoy is more of a magic user, so you're not going to be as fast-paced as Hades 1. They take advantage of that differentiation from the first one. You don't get to dash twice anymore. Now you have a longer dash, but you can also run. They have unique abilities with that. You don't have the mirror anymore. Now you have tower cards or arcade cards, I forgot, and you can choose which cards you want to add some permanent abilities. So all of the previous stuff from the first game are there, but they're just giving it a little twist. And overall, I would say the biggest difference to me from Hades 1 to 2 is that Hades 2 is just a bit more complicated in all of its mechanics that have been kind of like changed and enhanced. It's a perfect sequel to that extent, because you should really play Hades 1 first and then get to Hades 2, where yeah, the dashing is going to be a little bit trickier. Your abilities are a little trickier. You have mana now. You can charge your attacks. You have more to play around with your arsenal from the start. And I think that gives a lot more flexibility and customizations to player. But again, is that a good thing, right? Like, because one of the beauties of Hades 1 is kind of its simplicity, all things considered. You grab a weapon, you have a few buttons that do a few things, but they're very easy to understand and just to use. Hack and slashing your way through runs. Here, you do have to pay a bit more attention in terms of the abilities you use, when to use them, and how to use them. But it's not to the point where you can't just, you know, go into a run tired, and if you know the game, you can still, you know, have fun, right? It's not crazy complex in terms of its mechanics, just differently than Hades, much more, including the arcade cards. In the first game, you have the mirror, and the only difference you can do is flip it from one version to another. That's it. Here, you have a lot of options, and you can only choose a certain amount, and if you get a particular rogue filled, you can unlock another one to use, and then if you have a certain amount and you spend enough, you can get this arcane card, then you can do different templates of... Whew, there's a lot in those cards, and it's hard to explain without really seeing it. You know, the first game is massive, and here I think the game in its current early access version right now is bigger than Hades 1. That's also because of the crazy fact that they've decided to not have just one path. Here there's two paths. One that goes into surface and one that goes in the underground. And both of them will have completely different biomes, completely different monsters. Nothing is reused from one another. It's two different games. It's like, what? I could not believe they did that, because the amount of work required to do another path is so extreme to me. I almost wonder, was that necessary? Like, don't get me wrong, I love it. I love the fact that there's two different paths, and, you know, which path you're gonna go for is dependent on what kind of craftable things you can find to bring back to the hub, because yes, they went a little bit more complicated with the stuff you can find to give yourself permanent upgrades. Now, as the currencies are, there's a lot of different currencies you can find in the form of, you know, seeds, minerals you can rock. The fish are back, of course. You can't go wrong with fishing, obviously. There's a reason to pick, you know, one or the other, but there's a part of me that wonders, what if they would have put as much effort, as much work into just one path? Would that have been better, right? What if that one path instead had doubled the amount of content, as opposed to splitting the amount of work into two different paths? Now, don't get me wrong, I don't feel like both paths feel underwhelming. Somehow, they made it so that they both feel super full, which is crazy. But I'm kind of curious how necessary that was. Currently, again, I'm loving it. There's a lot to talk about in this game. I'm not going to get too much more into detail. This game, I think, is fantastic, and it's still in early access. Every time there's a big update, they really improve the game. Once again, listening to feedback, changing certain mechanics, like full-on mechanics that change depending on whether people, you know, don't really love them. The voice acting is fantastic. The art is fantastic. The story is even deeper than the first one. This time around, it's a little bit more serious, and you get some flashbacks, and oh my gosh, it's really, really, really good. I don't know why sometimes I see some people just not loving Hades, or just trying to bring down Hades, saying it's overrated. I get it. Like, yes, it is. Since it's almost mainstream, people don't always love talking about mainstream games anymore, especially in the indie community. I get it. But Hades 1 was fantastic. It really is, to me, a masterpiece. And I think Hades 2, they're doing equally fantastic job. I'm really excited to see the final version of this game, but every step along the way, I'm all for it, and this is going to be our first S tier of tonight. I really like Hades 2 more than the first, but I'm taking a break until the full release. Oh yeah, and I also understand, you know, people that are not going to get into Hades right now, especially a game like this that has like a big focus on lore and story. Like, I'm not gonna say that you should try to play it right now if you want to wait. I totally get it. I think you should totally play it once it's out if you're into this kinds of games, because it's gonna be great. I like playing it currently in early access because I find it interesting to see the changes they make, actually get to look at the behind the scenes of development. You know, I personally find that interesting, and I also just like the game as is right now. But yeah, if you want to wait, totally get it. Honestly, feel free to. Yeah, I would almost recommend waiting for the full release, because I think we're almost there. But you're in for a treat once it's out. Next up, we've got Halls of Torment. This is going to be another Horde-like. I was very excited to play this one because, as you may see, this might look familiar. This is very much inspired by good old classic Diablo. I was a big Diablo fan, and when I saw the visual of this game, I was like, oh, is this actually old or not? It is not. This game is pretty new. This made my top 10 list of last year. Again, a lot of games on here. There might be spoilers from if you've watched the top 10 list of my last year, which is also why I might not get into as much detail for some of those. But yeah, I think this is one of the better Horde-likes I've seen in a while. Once again, very simple gameplay. In this regard, it really doesn't really try to do anything unique in its mechanic, which is totally fine. I think what they're trying to do instead is focus on the overall experience, the exploration, and the progression of the game. This is a game that has a lot of unlockables. I think one of the core things of this game is unlocking things. There are like, it seems to be like 1,000 things to unlock in this game. I think every character has a huge like board of like achievements that you can go for, and there's also obviously a bunch of boards for non-specific characters. So one of the beauties of this game are the first few hours of play. honestly, this game kind of gave me the same feeling that I had when I was playing Vampire Survivors for the first time, and that's a big compliment. The feeling where I played a run, and when I finished the run, I saw so many achievements that all gave me new things to look for, to try out, new characters, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I realized that throughout, like, in the level, I actually found like a tome, and then there was a narrator like talking about like, oh, there's a quest that you have to find, and I was like, oh wow, okay. And so I started like looking around the level, because effectively this is one of those infinite level layouts where there's no borders, it just goes as far as you go, so you can just kind of explore as far as you want, similar to Vampire Survivors in that regard. And so I was trying to find these quests that were given to me during during a run, and then I would find it, and I would get a gem, and when I would get a gem, the boss would take massive damage. I was like, oh my gosh, and then I unlocked a bunch of stuff from it. And then I unlocked the next level, and then the next level looked completely different, and then there was different enemies, and then there was another quest where I had to follow a trail of blood, and oh my gosh, the feeling of progression in this game was so enjoyable the first few hours. Every time you unlock a new level, it is so amazing. And getting to see the new enemies, and the new bosses, and the new characters you're going to be playing, and the new abilities is really the best aspect of this game. That being said, I still have a few issues with this overall still. First of all, the game does a terrible job at explaining what's going on. The UI is really bad. When you go in your menu and you try to understand what the keyword force does, you have to click on the force, and then it gives you like a number that makes no sense, and you have to go through another thing to understand what force actually does, and then you realize force is actually specific to, it does things specifically to other abilities, and you're like, what does that even mean? And you're like, I don't understand. So they don't really do a good job with overall explaining a lot of the stats and some of the specifics, which is fine. Once you start playing, you know, you'll get the hang of it, and overall, it doesn't really matter super much, because you're going to be leveling up so much that, you know, it's one of those Roguelikes where, yeah, whatever you pick will generally be good, and it's all about the abilities. The abilities are really cool. Some abilities are really unique, and once you upgrade them enough, you can then enhance them and evolve them. I love when games do that, similar to Vampire Survivors, when you actually get to see the evolution of some of those abilities for the first time. Oh gosh, it feels awesome. Once you've seen all the levels, and you've seen all the bosses and all the abilities, which does take a while, I don't think the game is as replayable as other Roguelikes in that regard. But until you get there, man, I think this game is an absolute blast. So with all the things you have to unlock, all the abilities, all those little secrets and those quests. Again, those quests I talked about, there's only one per level. I didn't know that, and until I knew that wasn't the case, oh man, it felt great. So sorry to spoil it, but yeah, there's only one of those unique quests per level. Once you've done them, you know, you've done them. But I wish there was more. I wish there was more unique things you could find during levels. I wish there were more bosses, and I wish there were more levels. But, you know, when my main complaint is that I want more, that's a good thing. So, Heart of Torment, very, very solid Horde-like, very simple in concept with wonderful visuals that really bring you back to the good old days of Diablo if you were into that. And if not, I still think, you know, it has a very unique charm to it. Personally, I love it. So I'm going to put the Halls of Torment as another nice A tier. A lot of good A-tier games this time around. Next up, we've got Heroes of Hammerwatch 2. This is a sequel to Heroes of Hammerwatch 1, in case it wasn't obvious. I reviewed the first game a while back. I actually was not a huge fan of the original. I could definitely come back to it, but for some reason, I figured, you know what, instead of going back to the first one, I'm just going to wait for the second one and see how that one feels. So this is a top-down action adventure roguelike. You know, you start in the village and you just explore. You get, you know, you have different biomes. You're always going to be going through the same biomes. You start in the forest, then you get into the cave, then you get into like the church, blah blah blah. You're always going to be fighting the same bosses. But it's all about, you know, the full exploration aspect of going from that little like village out in the woods all the way to the very deep dark lair of the final boss, which I will not spoil, obviously. So I actually finished this game, done it twice, And yeah, I had a good time. The way this game works is that this has a pretty cool permanent progression system. For me, it almost gave me like a RuneScape vibe, which obviously there's way better games than RuneScape to compare to. But the visuals, first of all, are really nice. I think you know the characters, they're hard to see, the monsters are hard to see, but the overall environment is very immersive and really gives you a nice sense of adventure, especially since you start in that little village that you're going to be building more and more things. You're going to build a bridge, haha, good timing. So it's nice that you always die and come back and just add new buildings. I think one of the most satisfying aspects to it is the meta progression system, where you come back and you just see what new building you're gonna have, what new NPC you're gonna unlock that's gonna give you some cool new abilities that you didn't even think you were going to play with anymore. You start the game by choosing a class. You can pick whatever class you want, and then every time you finish a run, you're going to be gaining levels and you're going to be upgrading this particular character. But you can choose classes whenever you want and just start fresh. You're going to be starting fresh in terms of your own character, but the buildings and the village is always going to stay this. It is always going to be upgraded however you did. It kind of has a feeling of, you know, you create your own character and like you get the new abilities and oh yeah, I don't play these games anymore, but having your own character that you can just stick to and get new abilities, new upgrades feels pretty great. I will say I was kind of surprised. If you pick any of these classes, you will eventually be able to pick a subclass, and that subclass really changes things, which is great. But you get that really late. I think roughly like 70% through my playtime is when I was finally able to pick a subclass, and that drastically changed the way that I was playing. It made me way more powerful too. I love the feeling of exploration that the game had, and you know, the feeling of, you know, building a character, building a village with the visuals and the environment. I think it's very satisfying. Now, the gameplay is extremely simple. And I think some people like how simple it is. As part of the enjoyment of the game is how simple that gameplay is. And obviously, once again, this is a game that can be played multiplayer. I'm still sticking just to single player, as I said, and then maybe my criticisms might be different if it was multiplayer. But in general, I would say that the gameplay is so simple that it does get very repetitive after a while, especially since the levels, while they're visually very enjoyable, they're very repetitive. A lot of the time is just a bunch of rooms with a bunch of enemies, and you do the same ability doing exactly the same thing. I actually love the roguelike elements of this game. You have a lot of things you can find, new abilities, new items, stuff like that, that are only there for the run, and I think they're great. They have some really cool, they just have some really cool effects. I really enjoy them. I was killing the enemies because you get more XP, more gold and everything. You kind of need to do that, but I was definitely looking forward to seeing what the next big step is, because fighting bosses in this game, oh, feels so epic. Even though you're doing the same abilities the same way every single time, just the feeling of killing this a huge monster as your little tiny character is really, really cool. But once I got to the final boss and I beat the final boss, I personally was like, I'm done. Because for me, personally, the most enjoyable portion was, again, the discovery and the exploration. So, if I'm not mistaken, in the first game, they released DLC, or there was just a lot of sub-areas you could find, like a lot of, you know, hidden worlds and stuff like that. I don't think there is in this game, which I don't know if they're planning on adding. I'm kind of sad that there isn't. I looked it up, at least, I mean, maybe there's more information now, but to my understanding, there are no hidden worlds and hidden biomes, which I do feel like this game would be awesome with. So hopefully they will add it, but if so, I kind of wish it was added already. But maybe I just didn't find them. But I also did look it up after I finished the game. So if you did enjoy the first game, first of all, I do think that this is a really solid sequel. That being said, I wasn't super familiar with the first game, but for this as a standalone, this game was a very, very enjoyable experience for me. I really was looking forward to upgrade my character, upgrade my village, and just see the next boss, see if I could finally beat it with all these upgrades I got. And once I beat everything, to me, the game was over. And I had a really, really solid time doing so, even if things did get a little repetitive to me, and I was really, really looking forward to the next area and next boss a lot of times. So, to me, I think Heroes of Hammerwrath 2 is going to be a very high B tier for a game that I really had an absolute blast playing until the very end. Next up, we've got Let Him Cook. This is another Horde-like. This was actually one Horde-like that was just sent to the channel, just like other Horde-likes, other than Archon from the very beginning. Very simple mechanics, you know, nothing too crazy. You are just going to be moving around, things are going to be shooting automatically. You do have a dash, and this is a Horde-like that has the shop mechanic instead of the upgrade mechanic. So instead of just being in one level where you're constantly leveling up, here it's by wave, and in between waves you're going to be going to the shop. And you're going to be buying some stuff. Some of the cool, unique twists in this game that I really do enjoy is not only do you get weapons, you can only have 2 weapons at a time, but you can hire some assistants that are going to be carrying weapons for you, and these assistants have their own mechanics. There are some cool synergies and some cool things you can try to combine with the weapons and the assistants. And also the music, and obviously, again, the visuals are great. There's a lot of different enemy designs that are just hilarious. And the music is super jazzy and just super, super cool. There's a lot of aspects in this game that are to the beat of the music, including some of the gameplay too, which is awesome. So like PJ Sandwich, I think is his name. I don't know the different DJs, I kind of forgot. But in any case, like sometimes when the beat is about to drop, the game slows down and then boom, you get back into the action, which is really funny because you could actually use that to your advantage, like gameplay wise, because things slow down, and obviously this is a Horde-like where things get pretty chaotic. It's really funny that they decided to add that to the gameplay itself. PJ Sandwich, yeah, there you go. Our great DJ, I will say. I think this game really put a lot of effort into just the overall vibe and, like, you know, charm of what they're trying to go for, which is food in a very funny, like, comedic way for a Horde-like. There's even an entire mechanic that revolves around food. So basically, some weapons are going to be dealing damage to specific foods. Some weapons that are good against vegetable enemies, against dairy enemies, that kind of stuff, and that can also, there's also other synergies that go along with it. Some assistants are going to be better with specific weapons. If you have a certain amount of specific weapons, you're going to get some inherent bonuses, blah, blah, blah. I mean, generally, I would say that there's a lot of content already for a small indie game that's in early access, and I think they're doing a really good job currently with a game like this. Now, there are a few things that I could see being tweaked here and there. So far, I do feel like the game is a little unbalanced. I think some mechanics are kind of broken, and others are just feel too weak. The bosses are really, really cool. That being said, this is another game that has bosses be so different than the rest of the game that certain abilities and certain like playstyles just are going to be just not going to work for bosses versus normal runs, which I'm not a huge fan of. For instance, there's no lifesteal or like health regen during bosses, which I get, it makes it more intense, but that means that lifesteal and health regen I'm not going to try to go for in normal runs if I'm worried about the boss, which kind of immediately just nullifies an entire mechanic. So I kind of wish there was another way to make bosses feel more intense without having to just completely nullify an entire mechanic. The food family mechanic is also, I like the idea and the concept, but that does mean that basically you're going to be fine. Like when you start a run, you're going to see the final boss is going to be a meat boss. So inherently, I'm just going to go for meat items, and then if I see a wave, the next wave is like, oh, the next wave is a vegetable, so your meat weapons are going to be way weaker. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to be changing my entire build just because the next wave is vegetable themed. One thing I do want to note, the UI is fantastic, which is really cool for a small indie game. Again, menus make so much sense. Everything is explained very well. When you fuse a weapon with a newer one, it does it automatically for you. If you're like, oh, do I have this weapon? Oh, yep, it immediately tells you very clearly. Do I have synergy with this? Oh, yep, it tells you very clearly. Oh, should I be getting this? Yep, you should probably get this. Everything is really explained to you very, very clearly, thanks to the wonderful UI and like just player information that's been delivered. So I really like that aspect. Visually, it can be a lot, and I think that's gonna happen with this kind of camera angle. It's like not fully top down, and it's like a weird 2D aspect. And with bullets coming your way. It can be hard to visually see what's going on sometimes. That being said, I did see that this was improved originally from the first time I played it. They've put in more accessibility options. I think they've put a really nice amount of accessibility options in this game. They really made sure that players are comfortable playing this game, which is great. I think you can change the stroke of every enemy, the stroke of every bullet, the stroke of your own character. I think they really put a lot of effort into that, at least since last time I've played. So I really big thumbs up on my end. I think that, again, inherently there's always going to be a lot going on screen, and I'm curious to see how it's going to look in its final version. But I would say currently, if you're looking for a ridiculous, horde-like with great music, a great theme, and solid gameplay, then I would say, yeah, this is a pretty good game. I'm gonna put this currently as like probably like a lower B tier, but again, this is an early access, and I could see this game definitely climbing up the ranks. So once again, good job. This I know there's not many people behind this game, so solid work. Next up, we don't have Magic Book because, funny thing, I went on the Steam page recently for this game, and they rebranded, and this game doesn't exist anymore, apparently. If you currently go in this game's Steam page, you can't buy it anymore, I think? Yeah, I guess you'll never know what this game is until the newer version comes out, so pretty unique situation. I have never seen that happen, so... Next up, we've got Magicraft. Magicraft is an action roguelike where the gimmick is that instead of having weapons, you have wands, and you can customize those wands very extensively, the main inspiration being Noita. And if you know Noita, then you know how crazy games can get in that regard. It's Noita, but it has a much more traditional action roguelike structure in terms of individual runs. I'm not going to get into the details of how Noita is, because it's a very unique game and there's a lot to talk about, and I've covered that game in my first tier list. But basically, the bottom line is you're going to have wands that are absolutely crazy, and it's all about how creative you can end up being with those wands. You might have a wand that creates a bajillion snakes that throw fireballs every time he does that, or you have a wand that when you use the wand it makes you move and then you explode, and everything that explodes then shoots meteors and then your computer crashes. It's very enjoyable, it's very chaotic, it's very fun, and spoiler alert, this was in my top 10 list of 2024. So once again, I'm not going to be diving too deep into this game. All I'll say is, even though Noita really has amazing replayabilities and a fantastic game, the game is extremely punishing, and unfortunately, even though I do think it is one of the most unique games out there, it's not for everyone just because of the inherent nature of how punishing it is. So I think this is almost like a really nice introduction to this crazy mechanic, this crazy like wand building mechanic, because the game is much simpler outside of the wand system and is much less punishing. And I think it's also much more approachable because naturally, it's just an action roguelike where you just have multiple biomes, different rooms. It's a Hades-like in that regard. It's very much like a Hades-like. Very similar to Ember Knights in terms of its progression and the overall feel in terms of the different biomes and different bosses, I would say. But again, it's all about those wands. You could spend so long talking about how those wands work and just coming up with crazy stuff. Ultimately, you can see, even in the trailer, they showcase, a moment where there was like drop frames. That's how you know that is, it's supposed to be crazy, right? So if you're comfortable with understanding how you can create those wands, you're gonna end up with some crazy stuff. And ultimately, by the end or like mid-late game of every run, you're gonna have completely broken wands that are just going to just be chaos. While very enjoyable, it does get a little repetitive in my opinion, but getting there in the mid-game where you get to find some cool combinations of wand stuff is really cool. I also think this game expanded even further in the different types of wands. You're gonna have wands that are gonna be casting spells by themselves without you like grabbing them, and I think that's awesome. If you really want to have fun experimenting and trying to create your own broken build, I mean, this is a game for you. I mean, just look at the craziness they're showcasing in this trailer, right? Like, that is not too hard to do. You would think this is something you get after a very long time. It really isn't. The roguelike elements are pretty good. Outside of the wand stuff, there are still some relics here and there. I think there should be more, and they could be a little bit more interesting here and there, but they're pretty good. They're pretty good. There's also some potions. The different characters, there's also different characters. Oh, hey, actually, there's a character from a thing in Wonderland that we just covered before. The vibe of the game is something I personally struggle with. There's like a very, like, when you look at this, it looks very, you know, like fantasy and like really epic, but the vibe is kind of goofy, and like the main character is not a really charismatic person that you're controlling. Like, you're finding NPCs that like, oh, you need to save the world, and you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Wow, this is cool. Supposedly the story is that you're just a kid on a computer that got sucked into the video game, so as the kid, you're just like, you're saying memes while like the NPCs are trying to save the world. It's weird. It's not for me, vibe-wise. I've had a blast creating unique builds and unique wands, and this is definitely a game that I do see myself coming back to. It would be cool to see even more unique things in the run, you know, more events, more unique bosses. They did a very interesting thing with the final biome. I'm not gonna spoil it. If you've seen the true final biome, then you know what I'm talking about, and I kind of wish that was instead spread out through the run instead of just being at the end. Also think that they don't have their own music, I think. I don't know if that was only in early access. I know the game is fully out, but I think the game is not using its own, like, it doesn't have like actual composed music for the game, which would be a really big shame. Very, very satisfying game. If you enjoyed Noita and you want a different take on it, yeah, give this one a try. It gets very chaotic very quickly. I'm gonna give this a pretty solid ranking of A. Next up, we've got Moonwatch. Moonwatch is a, how do I describe this? A deck building, turn-based, real-time action roguelike. Got that? So, basically, this is another one of those games that just tries to use a very unique concept and build a game around it. It's a super hot deck building game. Whew. That's pretty crazy when you think about it. So if you don't know what Super Hot is, Super Hot was I think originally a VR game, or maybe it became a VR game. In any case, it's a game where you're in first person, and as long as you don't move, nobody else moves. So here, Moonwatch has a similar mechanic where as long as you don't move, nothing happens. And while you don't move, or actually while you move or don't move, doesn't matter, but in any point, you can use abilities from pretty much your hand. Like, it really is like a deck building game in real time with this like time stop effect. So you always have a hand of abilities that you've built throughout the run, and whenever you stop moving, you can use them, and those will actually trigger even if time has stopped. Some, will be like, explode into a fan of knives. So when you stop moving, you throw it. It will be thrown. It will explode. But then you have to continue moving in order for the fans to expand. The whole concept is really cool and really unique. And I forgot to mention, but these are the developers behind Backpack Hero. And Backpack Hero was also a pretty unique and really cool concept that started off, I think they were one of the first to start off this whole backpack thing. I'm happy that they have another cool, unique concept to play around with. And also, this is another early access game. I do expect this game to have a lot of tweaks and more content throughout the month. I think we're pretty early in the early access, but I definitely wanted to feature this game nevertheless. You start each run by choosing a character. Each character is going to have a different starting deck, and we'll have drastically different things they're going to be finding throughout the run. Each character is really, really different. Like, the run is really dependent on the character you're going to be picking. When you start your run, you're always going to have the same deck, and then when you beat a room, you can add a new card to your deck, or a new ability, or whatever you want to see it. During fights, you have a certain amount of mana. That mana gets replenished faster the less you move, and basically you can use a certain amount of things depending on how much mana you have. You have to replenish it, and then that's the loop gameplay overall. So you can pick one of those, throw a grenade, and then you have to kind of like find a way to wait until you can replenish mana, hopefully be far enough to just stick around and just gain more mana. It's a cool loop. I do think currently the game is pretty unbalanced and can be a little finicky with some of the mechanics. This does feel pretty early to me for a game that's in early access. There are some wonky like mechanics that feel very exploitable, and some mechanics that feel a little underwhelming. I do feel like each character has like 3 different builds to go for. Pretty much, you know, like if you're gonna be the engineer, you can go for the electric build, or the turret build, or the ball build. That's about it, you know, like you can try to fuse certain here and there, but I don't think they fuse with each other extremely well. So I do feel like a lot of the runs currently feel fairly similar depending on the build you're going to go for, and there aren't that many abilities currently in this game. But again, these are things that are expected to grow a lot. I think it's pretty easy to break the game currently, which is fun. I don't think it's necessarily a problem, but it is something to be careful with. Because there's a lot of, since there aren't that many items and not that many abilities currently, it's easy to just find duplicates of things, and sometimes it can just like, you know, double, naturally is gonna create some chaos. So some builds I thought were very powerful, some, if it didn't get like good combos, it would feel very weak. Also, there are some boss items that are really impactful. They almost feel like cursed items, like in Slay the Spire. Here, that is definitely the case. There's a boss item where it feels very polarizing. I don't know if that's the right term, but basically, you can't gain mana anymore if you move at all, but you gain mana back for killing enemies. So as long as you kill enemies, you're you're just going to be decimating absolutely everything. But the moment you just have a bad start and you don't kill anything, you're just dead. Just straight up dead. There's nothing you can do, because then you just can't stay in one position to try to regenerate a little bit of mana. You're just completely dead. So there's some drastic things are completely overpowered or just kill you instantly kind of vibe currently. And I also wish there was a better system to potentially discard your hand or reshuffle, because sometimes you're going to be left with a hand that you just don't want, and you just have to use it, and it kind of feels bad. So there's definitely some tweaks here and there that can be made. I also think some of the boss battles, I think most bosses you don't actually fight, you just have to stand in one area, and not being able to use your abilities to try to kill a boss doesn't feel great. Like for instance, this boss here, this boss in the middle, you cannot deal damage to it. You have to just activate 4 electric towers to beat the boss. Even if at the end of like activating all 4, the boss would be active and then you throw all your abilities. I understand that the game realizes that it's easy to just do a ton of damage, but I would still want to decimate a boss. I feel like I don't think a single boss has a DPS check, which I don't know. I think that's a wasted opportunity. So I think currently the core idea of the game is really solid, and I think there's a lot that can be done with this idea, and that's why I'm very excited to see where this game is going to go. But currently, I think even in early access, this game does feel like it's a little underwhelming. I think there's a few things that I would tweak here and there. It needs a bit more content. Bosses don't feel as super satisfying, and runs do feel pretty unique from one another. But once you've tried all the different builds, you kind of like, you don't have too much left to try, in my opinion. So definitely this is a game that is just, to me, just needs more content, which is to be expected as it is early access. As for now, I'm going to put this as a high C, and noticing that this game has a lot of potential, and I'm very excited to see where it can go, whether it will go to B, very likely, or even potentially A, depending on how much tweaking there is, how much they improve on certain aspects, more content. I will say visuals do feel a little minimalistic even to me. I'm not a huge fan of the visuals. That being said, I like the idea and the vibe. The overall vibe is pretty funny. You're just in space and you're fighting zombies. You're fighting zombies and vampires in space. Period. It's very funny. But yeah. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this game is going to go in the future. Next up, we've got Mortal Sins. This is a first-person action combat roguelike dungeon crawler-ish. The meat of this game is pretty much what you see. You're just first person, you have a sword or you know, a weapon, and you kill hordes of enemies by dismantling them, and just, it's very bloody, it's very chaotic, it's very enjoyable. Now, at first glance, it's kind of hard to know what to expect from this game outside of the gameplay. I was kind of surprised by what this game was actually offering. This is actually a combo-centric game where you have different possible attacks, which include dash attack, kick, swing, charge swing, and then your main ability. And basically every class that you have, and there's a lot of different classes, like a ton of different classes, you know, like your sorcerers, your monks, your hunters, that kind of stuff. Each of these classes are going to have unique combos, and these combos, you can unlock more and more of those combos, and so you have to get used to, you know, figuring out which combo you want to do. If you want to do like a, if you do stab, dash, kick, stab, then charge, it creates an extra little thing. Most of them are not super fancy. It doesn't do like something absolutely ridiculous. It just adds an extra little effect usually to your combos. And the idea is you just constantly change these combos, and then you get more points depending on how well you keep those combos going while killing enemies along the way. I was not expecting that when I first looked at this game. I thought the gameplay was going to be much simpler, but no, they really made sure that they really want to really expand on having different movesets, combining them into something unique. Now, originally, when I first started playing this a while ago, you had to do all those combos yourself. Naturally. They've actually changed that recently, where now you can have an auto combo feature where the game just kind of like shuffles through some of those combos and does them automatically for you, which does sound very, very cheap, but actually it's pretty cool because ultimately, with the amount of different characters there are in this game, and classes, and the amount of different move combos you can do, and how fast-paced the game is, I actually think it fits quite well. So I think right now, the gameplay of how it's supposed to be is that you have the auto combos on, and then there are more complicated combos that you can try to go for yourself. But then you don't have to think about every single combo anymore, and you can just have one specific combo that you want to try to do more regularly. You can just leave that on the screen for you to try to do every now and then. I also think that you get like a nerf for doing the auto combo. There's a very slight nerf, but in general, I think this really is much more beginner friendly to have that, and to me that was very enjoyable to have. Obviously, if you're really comfortable with the game, you might want to try to minimize those auto combos, right? So you can just try to specifically know what you want to go for, because some of those combos naturally are going to be doing some specific effects that you might not always want to trigger at all times, right? For instance, if you're playing the mage, one of the combos that it freezes enemies around you, so you might, with the auto combo, it will just automatically do that. But doing it manually, you're going to have the benefit of not having to deal with that. So I think they did a good job, you know, addressing the inherent issue of having to deal with so many possible combos in a fast-paced game while changing characters at all times. So I think it's kind of interesting. The game is in early access, but the game's been in early access for like 4+ years or something. So I don't know. I mean, to me, this game feels pretty full where it's at. I mean, if they're going to continuously add more stuff to it and just leave it as an early access as is, okay. But that's something I just have to note. In terms of the actual roguelike runs and the elements in that regard, you start by choosing your class, right? And then the game kind of like takes a permanent progression / roguelike progression. They kind of split it in two. So you're going to start in the hub at level 1, and then you're gonna go to the forest level. And then once you're done with the forest run, you go back to the hub, and you can upgrade your character. You can upgrade certain things. You can buy certain things, and you go to the next run, and that's going to be the cave run. And then, like, after you go back to the cave, you come back to the hub again, and you get more improvement. Blah blah blah. Then you do the 3rd level, and then once you're done with that, you get to the true final area, and then you try to beat the final boss. And voila. So it's kind of cool because it kind of gives you that sense that it's not just one run. You're actually doing 3 individual runs per character. So it does feel that there's almost like this sense of you are building a character and you're leveling it up, you know, kind of similar to Heroes of Hammerwatch. So it's almost like a permadeath mechanic, but not really. It's just a very long run. They're not extremely long for each of these levels, but overall, a full run of the entire game is gonna take, I think, an hour and a half, maybe, so it is on the longer end. I do wish that there was more to do in the hub currently, because since there is the implication that you're going to be going back in the hub between the worlds, between the biomes, then I kind of wish there was more to do there. This is a game that really focuses on gameplay, and the gameplay is very satisfying. You are going to be facing similar enemies here and there, like it is pretty repetitive visually and with the enemies, but it doesn't matter as much in this context because the thrill of this game is the craziness of all the weapons that you're going to be finding and having to switch equipment, and you have to constantly be switching your weapons and equipment because they lose durability, and just seeing like how you can deal with all these enemies is just very satisfying, even if you've seen the same enemies a million times. Because it's all about how you're going to, you're cutting off their arms, their heads, their legs, and they all then like act differently depending on what they're missing, which is really fun. So visually, some people are gonna like it, some people are not. All I'll say is the visuals are extremely unique. You can't deny that. You can actually change a lot of the filters on the visuals, which I really do appreciate because clearly it is a lot for some people. This can be a little too much, and I think the default option visually on this game was so crazy to my eyes, at least when I first tried the game like a year ago at this point. So I'm glad that you can really adjust things according to whatever fits you. I think the visuals are cool, great. They're very dark, and they're very, like, when you get into a level, when you get into a cave thing, it's kind of hard to know what is going on with this wall. That is part of the charm of this game, I would say. All the different classes, they do feel different. Ultimately, not crazy different compared to other games. Like, you're still going to just be doing a bunch of combos, and things are just going to die next to you. There's no ranged character that much. And the certain little roguelike elements you can find during the runs are enjoyable. They're not like game-changing. It's all about that core gameplay. Luckily enough, the core gameplay is super satisfying. So overall, I would say that if you enjoy this first-person view kind of gameplay from the good old days, this is a very enjoyable roguelike that has a lot of content because it's been in early access for like 4 years and they're still releasing more and more stuff. I have not delved super deep in this game, and I do feel like this is a game that if I'm sticking to, I will constantly find new things because there are so many classes to start with. I think this is a game that has hidden content. I love games that have hidden content because then it kind of pushes me to find the true ending kind of thing, and I do think this game has a true ending, a true final boss kind of vibe. I'm not 100% sure because I haven't gotten there, but I am actually excited to try to get there. So I would say Mortal Sin, really, really solid game. Very unique as well, and for that reason, I'm going to put Mortal Sin as a low A tier. Magicraft or Mortal Sin? Magicraft, Mortal Sin. Magicraft, Mortal Sin. I'm going to put it here. Next up, Paper Planet. This is a cute little, I don't know how to call it, defend your planet, bullet hell roguelike. How about that? Basically, you got a little planet, and you're controlling this little turret that you can move from left to right, as well as use a button to teleport to the other side, and you're shooting enemies that are trying to, destroy your planet. Obviously, first off, visuals, right? They have this really cute, hand-drawn, almost like, paper kind of vibe. It's cute. I can imagine that it's not for everybody. I enjoy it. I think it has a pretty cool vibe to it. Kind of reminds me a little bit of, again, Flash games. Naturally, the vibe, but also just a little bit of the gameplay is very Flash gamey to me. This game is extremely chaotic. You are going to end almost every single run with the screen being filled with bullets. And when I mean filled with bullets, it's to the point where the game will give you its own little error message saying, sorry, we had to get rid of the bullets because there was too much. And if you play well, you're gonna have that every single run. Naturally, there's a conversation about the feel being completely overpowered. It is always satisfying to be overpowered, but if it happens too often, then it doesn't feel rewarded and it doesn't feel as unique anymore. I think this game kind of does struggle with the fact that you're almost going to be overpowered. I think the core gameplay is is enjoyable. It's very straightforward. They really made sure that the game was simple, you know, by just moving around and then teleporting, and all you have to do is shoot whatever you see with your cursor, and you have to evade yellow bullets, and then you have to block red bullets with another button. It's just, you know, an extra little mechanic that is used rarely in there, but it is there. You know, what's enjoyable in this game are all the roguelike elements that create the absolute chaos. There are a lot of cool items you could find, and the chaos is gonna look different every run. Even if it's always gonna end up with chaos, at least I will say that it tends to always look different, and it's very enjoyable the first few times to have all this craziness. I picked this one back up again for the tier list, and I was supposed to only just do one run because I already got the idea, but I was like, okay, I just want to see more chaos. And then once I saw the more chaos, I was like, okay, I'm good. In terms of the actual progression within the game, I wish there was a little bit more to the runs. Currently, you're always going through the same biomes. You're going to be fighting the same few bosses. The bosses are really cool, by the way. I love the mechanics of the bosses. You actually do have to pay attention and be careful with some of those movesets. Generally, what ends up happening is that the normal enemies, you kind of just like shoot and just, you always one-shot everything very easily. But the bosses is where you have to be more careful. And I really like that. I wish there were more bosses. I wish there was a bit more content in terms of what you can find within the runs. Outside of the runs, there's a few things in the meta progression. I think the meta progression is kind of weak. In this game, you have like a shop, and you can unlock one of 4 random items to permanently add to the runs, but you don't know what they do. And when you grab one, all the other ones disappear, and then you find new ones, but again, you have no idea what they are. There's a few like actual like upgrades you can give yourself, but these are very, very minimal and very situational. So the outside of the run, things are a little like, whatever. There are different planets you can play with, and they play drastically differently. That's really cool. You have a planet that the entire planet moves instead of you moving. There's an entire planet where you're actually not even on the planet. You're just a spaceship going around it, which is a completely different playstyle. So I really like the fact that the planets do feel different, and you can just get new ones. I think the game does get a little repetitive, naturally. I think the best replayability aspect are the actual planets. Currently, I've had a lot of fun creating a bunch of chaos. I don't know how much I'm planning on coming back to it, but honestly, if you want to have some fun for a few runs, then give it a shot, because it is a fun mess for sure. So I'm gonna put this one as a B tier for now. And no, it is not an early access. I was wondering if it was an early access. So I don't know how much more support it's going to get in the future. If it is as it stands, then, you know, it was a good time. And hopefully it can be a good time for you too. Next up, we've got Picayune Dreams, I think is how you pronounce that. This is another Horde-like. Similar to other Horde-likes, gameplay is pretty straightforward. But this game definitely has a pretty unique twist to it. All the focus is actually the story. It's similar to games like Inscription, Undertale, these kinds of games where it almost breaks the fourth wall, or it's just, there's a lot to the story that really is very mysterious and almost disturbing. Basically, Picayune Dreams is a fever dream. This game does have a pretty committed community, and when I first started playing, I was like, okay, I've played a lot of these kinds of games. Yeah, to be honest, the gameplay actually does feel pretty great for a Horde-like, I will say. It's one of those that doesn't have many mechanics. It's just literally moving, and then there's like a big blank effect, like your black hole effect. That's it. I don't think there's a dash, and it's just, you know, the abilities triggered by themselves. Very, very straightforward stuff, but it does feel really good. It's one of those games where the hitboxes and the hurt boxes are very clear, and you're really, really just going from one enemy to another, and it's all about evasion. And the bosses are awesome bullet hell experiences. But, you know, the gameplay was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I've seen it a bunch of times. And then the story started occurring, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? I was so into the story and like the mystery behind why we're doing this and the fact that we're repeating it, and it gets really messed up. It's really dark. It's very disturbing. It's very mysterious. I actually remember when I first started playing this, I was playing it on my Steam Deck in the plane, and I was planning on playing a bunch of games during this flight, and I just ended up just playing this game for like 4 hours straight, and then the plane landed, and I was like, I don't want to drop this game. I'm like, I just need to know what's gonna happen. I was just so curious. So man, there's very few games that have been able to do this for me. And again, Undertale, Inscription, those are some of those games. I wouldn't say it's at the level of Undertale or Inscription in that regard, but it's still one of those kinds of games that is just so rare to come across in that regard. And the gameplay is enjoyable. Again, I think it's probably the weakest part of the game, but there's not many weak parts of this game, to be honest. Sometimes I kind of wish I could just get to the next story without having to go through the gameplay as much, because there's not much replayability in terms of the gameplay. Yeah, you'll get different abilities, but they all just do similar things from one another. Finding different bosses, finding all the story elements, and all, like, discovering the mystery behind the story is just fantastic. So it's one of those games that, you know, you can only play once-ish, right? You know, it's one of those kind of experiences. You can, you know, there's replayability in the, you know, there's a harder mode, and you can do more runs and get more chaotic. I think there is an endless mode. I think I did do the endless mode, and you know, it's just absolute chaos, and you just, like, you don't even move. You just press, you just let things happen. Whatever, right? It's enjoyable. But again, the bosses are really, really well designed. And there's also a cool, there's a pretty big meta progression. There's a huge upgrade tree outside of the runs. I have not even gotten close to upgrading everything on there. You don't need to get everything to finish the game, which is nice. So yeah, basically, again, it's a game that is focused on the story and decide to use simple gameplay in order to just, you know, show something. Similar to Undertale. You know, Undertale's gameplay is very simple at its core, but it allows people to just, you know, play something easily and then just get into the story. So I think Picayune Dreams is very unique in that regard. As for me, I would say that yeah, I mean, I've played a lot of Horde-likes. If it was just the Horde-like gameplay, I would say it's above average. It's definitely above average. So I'm gonna put Picayune Dreams as a solid A tier. And something that I would recommend people experiencing if they like this crazy vibe, as well as, you know, Horde-like gameplay. Next up, we've got Pogo Rogue. This is it's an action roguelike, where the main gimmick is that you're on a pogo stick, and you're trying to climb up. This is one of those games that really relies on its main gimmick here. You can probably guess where you're getting from just looking at this game, right? When I first played this game, it was in early access. It is now fully released, and wow, this is one of those games where there was quite a difference for me between early access and its full release. You're controlling a little robot with your little pogo, and the whole thing about this game is the controls. It's all about the controls. It is very hard to get used to. This is a very hard game. There is a rage game that's all about pogos. It's known to just be extremely hard. It's all about climbing up. Obviously, the controls are not as punishing as that game, but it's still really, really hard to get used to because it's very precise. If you move a little bit to the left, you're going to be pogoing a little bit more to the left, and then you're trying to do wall jumps, and even in the tutorial, they keep on saying, don't worry, it's gonna take a while for you to adjust, you know? So, boy oh boy, when I first started playing this game, when it was in early access, I'm gonna be honest, I did not have a good time because it was just so hard and it was just not enough for me to play with, and I was just like very discouraged. And I was like, okay, honestly, I could try to get used to the controls, but the game was just not enthralling enough for me to just keep on going. So I was expecting to give this a C rating, but then I decided to play it again yesterday before the tier list, and wow, this release definitely changed things up. They definitely decided to bring down the difficulty overall, not by changing the controls. The controls are still very tricky. I'm not too sure what they did, but that's the beauty of it, is that I don't even know exactly what they did, but it was definitely much easier, and it definitely made me feel like I had more space for mistakes. I think it probably, you know, made levels bigger, enemies less annoying in some regards, more space, more room for mistakes, and I actually had a really enjoyable time. Not to mention that the roguelike elements, they've really put in a lot more stuff in the rogue elements. There's a bunch of weapons. Basically, you can shoot similar to Downwell. Similar to Downwell, instead of Downwell, you're falling, but you can like shoot to like propel you upwards a little bit. It's the same thing here, except that you're trying to go up. So you can use your weapon to propel yourself up, but also to deal damage to enemies under you. There's a bunch of different weapons, and naturally, all of the weapons are going to feel very different from one another because they give you different kinds of propelling effects. So it's going to feel very different, naturally. And there's also different abilities you can find, and all the abilities are very drastically going to change the gameplay. You can have a little hat that shoots a little bullet every now and then on a cooldown. You can have a jetpack that, with very low fuel. There's a lot of things. There's like a huge propeller move. And then they added a huge hub world. There's a bunch of stuff you can do in the hub. It's one of those hub worlds where it takes a second to even just navigate because you're on a freaking pogo stick. But I gotta say, it's just so cool for me to see a little indie game that, I was not a huge fan of originally, and then like with a few updates ended up being a pleasantly enjoyable experience for me. And here's the craziest part about all this is this game you're seeing, it's free. This is a free game. Which I know I'm not trying to take that into account for my ratings, like I didn't talk about the pricing on other games. But why is this free? This is a very decent, unique action roguelike. Yeah, it's pretty small, all things considered, understandably so, but it's free? What? Okay, cool. So if you want to try it out, go for it. The catch of this game is just the inherent gameplay is extremely hard. This is a game that a lot of people are going to try for just a few minutes and just drop. It is punishing in its gameplay, not because of the screw you, I'm gonna make this hard, just purely because of the inherent nature of the pogo. It is very hard to get used to. It does take a little bit, and so I'm really happy that they really made the game much more approachable through their recent updates, because I do think that more people can really actually get to enjoy this crazy little action roguelike game. So I'm not gonna bring this up for other games, but I just have to say, it's a free game. That's insane. So I would say, give it a shot. Like if in any way interested in seeing how comfortable you are with a pogo mechanic, there's no reason not to try it. It's free. So I would give some love to the developers in that regard. As for me, I've only played it a little bit, but I did have a really good time recently, and I'm kind of curious to see how far it could go. If you want to, prove yourself that you're a god gamer, then this definitely could be the game for you. As for me, I'm going to, probably put Pogo Rogue as a cute little B tier. Again, good job. Very simple, very small little game, but it has a unique twist, which I love. And yeah, next up we've got Random Access Mayhem. This is an action roguelike where the gimmick is that you take control of your enemies, and you're supposed to constantly be switching between enemies in order to just progress. You don't have a body. You're just taking control of the enemies you see. Inherently, that's gonna be pretty interesting because that means that, well, you can't have like a crazy amount of enemies, right? Because otherwise, you're never gonna be able to get comfortable with one of them, right? So you're very limited in terms of the amount of enemy variety. But this is kind of part of the game. You start a run, you're gonna have the 4 main enemy types at the start, and you can choose one of them. And the idea of the game is that you're planning on switching bodies in mid-fight, and you get benefits if you do that correctly, if you do it fast. The game is really trying to push you to not just stick to one enemy, because naturally the first thing you would want to do is just to stick with one moveset and be comfortable with it. The thing about this game is that it is very hard. Random Access Mayhem is not an easy game. It's definitely not beginner friendly, I would say, because all of these robots, you would think, oh, it's just a little, one robot has a little, you can shoot, one robot can throw things. Oh no, all of them have mechanics that are very difficult to get comfortable with. Like, All of them. There's not a single one that's easy to use. Even the most basic one, which is the shooter guy, still has a very tricky timing to shoot further. There's a propeller effect that has a very tight timing. This little guy that throws stuff, you have to charge and then throw, and then like the throwing is very precise. Oh my goodness, it takes a while to get comfortable with all of it, and the game really does try to push you to take your time and learn all of them. There's great tutorials for all of these individual characters that you're going to be finding, and later on once you've beaten the first world, you'll be introduced to 2 more robots, and then I think they're planning on releasing a new one again. I don't know how far they're planning on going, but again, the more enemies you can take control of, the more crazy movesets you need to get used to, right? Once you've gotten to the point where you're comfortable with roughly all of those robots yourself, and then during battle you switch to another one, and again, the game does reward you for doing that, because it's trying to make sure that you constantly switch around, switching to another one, then using a different attack that is more useful against certain enemy types feels fantastic. It's very fast paced, but the game feels fair. It's very hard, but it feels fair. Everything that happens is gonna be your fault. It's probably because you just spent too much time not switching to another body. Because theoretically, you can be invincible for most of your gameplay if you want, because you can constantly switch to an enemy anywhere on the map. It's just that it uses fuel, and the more you switch, and the more you kill enemies with different bodies you take, the more fuel you get. Pretty much, there is a bit of meta progression on the side. It's fairly small, all things considered, but it's mostly all about just skill. It's a very skill-heavy game, and I do know that this is a game that was sent to the channel, so thanks again. But I do know that this game already had a pretty committed community, which makes sense for a game like this, because if you really want to be good at it, you gotta spend some time with it. In terms of the roguelike elements, they're actually fantastic. So basically, every time you level up, you actually upgrade one of the random robots you may encounter. Those upgrades can be just number upgrades, obviously, but it can also be pretty massive, like, gameplay changes, right? So for instance, one of the main robots is a flamethrower guy. So one of the upgrades you can get is you don't throw fire anymore, you just throw fumes that don't do anything, but when you let go, all the fumes explode. That's so different, right? There's an upgrade for the shooter guy that now like shoots fire, which is really cool. I was surprised by having a game that has skill-heavy core gameplay still have really cool actual roguelike elements. That was very surprising to me. So yeah, that was super cool. I've gotten pretty comfortable with the game myself, I would say. I think I can fairly consistently get pretty far in almost every run. I've beaten 2-3 runs at this point. I haven't gone to the end because, again, this is still early access in terms of the fact that they haven't even gotten to the end of the game, which is cool. I like this. I like having early access games where it's not just, oh, we're just going to improve the gameplay. We're also just, the final area is not unlocked yet, so you have something to look forward to on the next update. In this regard, you're going to unlock a new robot on the next update, so that's pretty exciting. Also, I didn't even talk about this yet, but the visuals and the vibe and the music is fantastic. The music is amazing. Super cool, like action, like electronic rock and roll vibe, I would say. And the hub is so beautiful. Such a beautiful hub where all the robots are just living their own life around, and you can just swap to any of them, and you just go around, and you can see all the little houses there, and then you can, depending on which robot you're controlling, you can go hang out with the other robots of the same type, and you can go fishing. The fishing minigame is so hard, by the way. I kind of hate the fishing minigame. It's nah. You can go to another part of the hub, and you can there's a little mini game you can find. The horde mode apparently is also in the hub. I love the fact that there's a lot of attention to the vibe of the game and the story, while also having a very skill-heavy gameplay and a really great roguelike progression. So I think this game is really, really solid. It's a very, very good game. In terms of my own feedback, I would say outside of the unique abilities you could find to really change the runs, and like usually what you're gonna do, at least in my experience, is that you're gonna focus on 2 robots types, oh, I'm gonna go for the can guy and the the punching guy this run. Or, you know, I'm gonna go for the flamethrower shooter guy. But, you know, it's cool. You have a lot of flexibility. And so the runs do feel different in that regard, but the level design is beautiful. I mean, I love the design of all these levels, but they're always the same. So it can be a little repetitive in terms of the levels. I do understand that that's something that I like having, you know, different level layouts. And considering the fact that this game is really focused on the story, vibe, and the gameplay, I understand that that might not be a priority. But I kind of wish there was a little bit more unique things to do during the runs, considering that you're also going to be encountering the same enemies all the time. Naturally, it's going to feel fairly repetitive in that regard, naturally, because, you know, you can't have a bunch of different enemy variety if the whole premise that you're only taking control of enemies, right? With very specific gameplay. So outside of that, I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm hoping there's going to continue being a community behind this game, because once it's out, man, this it's going to be very skill heavy, and it's exciting to see, you know, the best players playing this game. I'm very excited for that. I'm going to put RAM with a solid A tier in its current form, but again, it can only grow from here, so very curious to see where RAM is going to end up being in the next few months. Next up, we've got Redacted. Redacted is a action roguelike. It's a Hades-like. It's very much a Hades-like. So I'm just gonna be very quick with this one because I did like a pretty long video talking about my thoughts on this game. It's like a 40 long deep dive on my thoughts on the game's design and overall gameplay. So I'm just going to be fairly quick. I think this game looks great. It has a lot of content. Clearly, this is you know, it's a meteor game from a lot of the indie games that I've been showcasing. There's a lot to this game, but I do have a lot of issues inherently with some you know, some design mechanics behind it. I think the gameplay is okay. It can feel good at first, but the more you play, the more it feels a little, you can't combo things super easily. I find the roguelike elements to be pretty disappointing, and a lot of the more niche mechanics within it, such as the rival system, the people that are trying to also beat the run, like NPCs are trying to beat the run faster than you, so you're constantly on a clock, is not something I personally adore. But overall, if you're looking for another Hades-like game, there's not that many out there that are just that have a lot of content like this, that, you know, that do feel like a full-fledged game, right? So it is a good time. But when I really deep dive into it, I do think that it did have quite a few issues. But I know it's a decent game, all things considered. So I'm gonna put Redacted as like a pretty high B tier, just because, again, I did play a lot of it. Because, you know, it's a fairly grindy game. It's a pretty long game. So even if I had issues with it, you know, it kept me going for a while. So yeah, if you're into Hades, check it out. Next one, Returnal. So yeah, it took me a while to get to this game. I know people have been asking me for so long to review this game, and I did talk about it quite a bit in my top 10 list of last year, so I might not get into too much detail, but there's definitely a lot for me to talk about if I were to have another 50 minutes here. This is it's a third-person shooter action roguelike, and the thing about this game is that it's like the first AA/AAA roguelike. So, you know, that was interesting situation, because it was the first time that we had like that indie subgenre actually get developed with a bigger company, and I think overall they did a good job. I think it was a very, very enjoyable experience for me to finish the full game, and I think there's a lot to love about Returnal. I know some people love it and some people have certain issues with it. I'm definitely more in the ballpark that I think this game is just, gosh, it's almost frustrating to me, because obviously there's so much at its roots that is fantastic, right? The story, the first person segments like here are just so captivating. The fact that it's a bigger budgeted game means that they had more flexibility as to what they could do with it. You know, the worlds feel massive, like the different biomes are just crazy immersive, right? Which is awesome. And it also kind of has that Metroidvania feel a little bit. And I think they did a pretty decent job with that too. You know, like every run you come back and now you have a sword, and so now you can traverse things more easily. That was enjoyable. The bosses feel really cool. But my biggest issue with it is that this definitely did feel like it was a company that doesn't do roguelikes. Because the roguelike elements are just so disappointing to me. I was so sad to see that the game could have had fantastic roguelike elements, and you know that because there's certain aspects that are in the game that would make it that, but they just kind of missed the mark in my opinion. I could come up with so many unique ideas for abilities and relics that would make the gameplay just slightly different and feel like runs are different from one another while still keeping the core gameplay, because the core gameplay is super enjoyable, right? But a lot of the relics that you would find are just so boring. They're so boring, and I just really didn't care for them. Oh, more health, more of that. Now your sword deals more damage, or when you take damage, something happens. It's like, oh my gosh. Like, it was just so frustrating for me, because to me, I'm just so disappointed because I see a world where it could have been a perfect roguelike game as well as the third-person action game that it is. If you're not into roguelikes, then you probably can't envision what it could have been. But I do envision it. And I think that it's just disappointing in that regard. I like the exploration aspects. I love going from one world to another, especially the first time around. Currently, for me, the replayability is a little weak because, again, the roguelike elements are just kind of like whatever. There is a more roguelike mode in the big tower, and that's enjoyable, but it's, you know, I kind of wish it was in the core game. I definitely loved going through all of the new biomes and seeing the new bosses. For me, it felt like a non-roguelike game, and I had a blast just going through this adventure and just discovering all the new stuff. But once I was done beating the true final boss and getting the full credits, I was like, okay, well, I myself would rather just wait for the second one and hope they're gonna learn more from like the roguelike community. Again, I'm not saying that this should be like, oh, the craziest roguelike in terms of the roguelike elements. I know that as someone who works in the roguelike world, that, you know, I would say I want everything to be a roguelike. It's more, I don't want it to go too far off from the core gameplay, but I just think it was too weak. I think there's a fine line to have like unique roguelike elements to make runs feel a little bit different from one another for a game like this, and I'm just sad that that wasn't the case. So that being said, again, I'm just frustrated because I had something in mind that was, you know, very much my own vision and that I was hoping for in this game. But outside of that, I mean, geez, it's a beautiful game with an awesome story, with great visuals, and so Returnal is going to be a probably somewhere around here. Even though I spent most of my time complaining about the game, it's just because I like it and I want it to be better. There you go, right there, boom. Next up, we've got Ship of Fools. I don't know how to describe this game. You're on a ship, you can control cannons, and you're trying to shoot off enemies. It's an action roguelike with a pretty cool little gameplay mechanic. To be clear, this really is supposed to be a co-op game. I mean, I really do feel like the main focus of this game is co-op, much more than any other roguelike that I've covered so far. Now, I did say that I wasn't going to talk about the co-op experience if the game can be played single player, but in this instance I am just going to touch upon it a little bit because I actually did happen to play it co-op. I played it co-op and I played it single player. I played it co-op with my brother when I was on vacation, and we were like, hey, it's raining outside, do you have any roguelikes that we could do in co-op? I was like, actually, I want to try this game. So I actually did try co-op. We even beat the final boss. And then I came back to it myself to see the differences. So I've got the full experience. I think co-op is more fun. That's where I'll end it at, because again, I'm mostly focused on the single player, but the single player is still playable. First off, the visuals are really, really solid. That's really what caught my eyes from the start. I love the environment, the art style, and the idea that you're just there trying to protect your ship almost gave me like a Overcooked, but in roguelikes. Unfortunately, it is not that kind of gameplay as much as I would have hoped for. And I will say the first few hours of gameplay of this game were super, super enjoyable. It really does try to get you immersed in the world of this game by, you know, you wake up on this island right here, and then you're just like exploring like this little island that obviously, as you can see, is like destroyed, and you know that's your hub, and you're gonna fix things, you're gonna discover new NPCs. Again, this is nothing new, but that really gets me. I think it's great when games try to get you immersed in the world, and I think that game did a fantastic job in that regard. The music is great, the art, the animation, everything in that regard is really top notch. Unfortunately, I'll say that's probably the best part of this game to me, because I do have quite a few issues with other aspects of the game myself. First off, I think the gameplay is okay. I was kind of hoping there would be a little bit more. You really don't have much to do on the boat. Like, yeah, you're gonna be going from your cannon and refilling it and shooting. And that's about it. I mean, then you have your paddle, but the paddle is just kind of there for in situations where enemies are on your ship, and it's very straightforward. Just press a button, and then you can reflect projectiles. The reflecting projectiles is interesting. I actually like the idea. So if you hold your paddle button, you can then let go and reflect projectiles that are getting into your ship. But it takes so long to charge your paddle, and it's kind of visually weird to get to figure out where things are at all times. I like the idea, but I thought it was a little meh. You can see right there. It feels good when you get it, but in any case, I thought the gameplay could have been a bit more extensive. But it was still enjoyable, especially in co-op. I thought it was really fun to maybe like, oh, you're gonna refill your ship, you're gonna refill the ammo of this cannon. I'm going to shoot, right? I wish there was more like, you know, also maybe moving the ship a little bit. I understand that they didn't want to go too crazy with having a bunch of mechanics, because then it could just be too much, especially in single player. But personally, I thought it was a little repetitive in that regard. The roguelike mechanics, there's some good ideas, but there's also some things that I find pretty frustrating. You're gonna find different roguelike elements, right? You're gonna find trinkets that your character can wear that just give you cool benefits. I think those are the coolest parts of this game. So, you know, instead you can find a little amulet that gives you, when you shoot, it goes a little faster. Or if you shoot something on fire, something happens. Or your paddle now has a little beam effect. These were really cool to find. But then there are those bigger roguelike elements, which are like these totem things that you can just place on your ship. And these give fairly big effects. But there's a lot of them, and a lot of different ones of them. You can find different ammo types. You can find chickens that lay eggs that you can put into a cannon. You can find bombs. You can find just straight benefits. But your ship can only have like 4 of them at once. And I just find that super disappointing. Because what ends up happening is that by like even the end of the first world, your ship is gonna have all of those spots filled. There's some cool things to play with, right? You can find a new bird, chicken that can lay eggs. You can use those, but you're like, nah, I'm not gonna use that because it's just not as good as that thing. So I'm never gonna try this new thing. Some of them, you know, are just like, oh, give your ship plus 3 health. You're like, cool. But am I gonna use that over, you know, something that's gonna win me the game? Not really. So I was so often just disregarding so many of them, and it felt really a shame. I get the idea that you have to be selective, right? That concept can be good, but in this instance, I thought it was done way too narrowly. I think that, you know, you only have like 4 spots, and by the end of the first world, like not even by like not before even reaching the first world's boss, my ship was already full. And I don't know, I didn't personally like that. It could just be me, you know, if people like it, good. One other thing that I wasn't a fan of, though, was a lot of the roguelike elements, while they're cool, a lot of these like items that do very specific things, they're very, very build dependent. This is definitely a trickier side to designing roguelikes, right? Is to have items that are all about one particular mechanic. And this game, I think, just took it too far, especially since usually when you find a relic and stuff like that, you only have a choice between a few, right? You don't find them very often. So for instance, you can shoot harpoons, and harpoons are usually used to just grab things from the ocean. Now, there is a harpoon character you can use where if you actually use the harpoon against an enemy, you get a harpoon back. You're like, oh, that's pretty cool. You can try to go for a harpoon build. And then you realize that there are like, yeah, about a quarter of items in the game and during the runs are just harpoon upgrades. But if you don't go for a harpoon build, you're just never going to use your harpoon on enemies. There's no reason to do it. Same goes for paddle. Like, yeah, the paddle can be used for other things, but you either go for a paddle build or you don't. Or there's like a whole egg build you can go for, or like a whole dynamite build you can go for. But the problem is, since you're so limited in space, a lot of times it just feels like I'm never going to be using these things unless I'm really specifically going for that build. I want to be able to play with all these things, but a lot of times it just didn't feel very worth it. Same for the ammo. Sometimes you'll find a unique ammo and like, ooh, cool, that ammo does fire damage. Great. And then you're like, is there a reason to go for another ammo? Not really. If you like your ammo, like, having an extra ammo type on the ship is gonna take an entire slot. So you're just gonna disregard all the ammo types. I wish there was just more to play with, because right now it really does feel like the game is being very limited to the player. That seems to be like the choice they wanted to go for that I just don't love. And also the higher difficulties, you have to pay to unlock higher difficulties after you've defeated the final boss. I don't know why. That seems like a waste of currency. And also the rewards you get for clearing higher difficulties are extremely minimal. It doesn't feel very rewarding to go higher difficulty, in my opinion. I really wish there was more to look forward to, because currently the game does not feel very rewarding after you've cleared the game once. Which is a shame, because I think there's something really unique and very lovable at its core. I think the bosses look fantastic. I wish there were more variations. You're always finding the same ones, unfortunately. I like the fact that at the end of every boss, you then get like a cool upgrade, and it's always different. Like the first one is you can recycle an item. The second one is you can duplicate an item. And the third time through is you have a really big shop where you can sell stuff. So there's a lot of really cool aspects in it, and I think for me the best part of this game were the first few hours where we were still getting, comfortable with the mechanics and just discovering new NPCs and new areas, because effectively every area looks awesome and all the enemies feel quite different. So the exploration aspect is awesome. The visuals really do help with that, and it definitely was super enjoyable playing with my brother for like 2 days or so. I feel bad saying so much negativity about specific things. Let's not forget that, again, overall I think the core is pretty solid and I love the visuals and I did have a good time with it. I was just sad to see so many elements that just didn't work for me. So overall, even with everything said, I'm still going to give Ship of Fools a B tier, and the fact that I got to play it multiplayer, which again should usually not be a factor, in this instance I'm glad I got to see that aspect. I don't know how much different I would feel about the game if I never had played with my brother at first. But overall, the way I think of this game is a pretty good B tier, because again, the visuals and the overall discovery of the whole world at first was great. Auto target turret, way too strong not to use in this game. Oh yeah, you unlock different turrets, right? And in single player, you still have 2 turrets. You have to manage 2 at the same time, but one of them can be auto. That's one of the unique turrets. I was like, how are you not going to just use the auto turret and then one of them you just use to aim? It just seems so... I'm surprised it's not like just part of the core, because obviously I think everyone's gonna do that, right? I mean, again, I don't know the meta of this game, but it does feel a little weird in that regard. Next up, we've got Slice and Dice. This is a turn-based dice roguelike. It's not really a deck building in this instance. It's a pretty unique concept. Basically, you're controlling 5 characters, and you're just going through this, like, it's like a dungeon crawler where you're just going from fight to fight to fight, and every fight you get to upgrade one of your characters or get an item to give to one of your characters, and the gameplay is all about whatever you roll and what the enemies roll. And I've talked about this game in my top 10 list of 2024, so I'm not going to dive too deep into it, but this game is very simple mechanically, but gets very strategic with all the possible characters and items you can find and all the different upgrades and all the enemies you're gonna fight. The key word here is content. My goodness, this game has so much content. What the hell? It's crazy how much there is to do in this game. There are so many characters, so many game modes. All the items are extremely different too. They really, really are unique. It's just crazy how much there is in this game. And it's a very simple game. It's also not a very punishing game, because while you're going through an entire run, you're supposed to just beat 20 enemies. In between fights, you regenerate pretty much everything. Like, well, if you've died during the last fight, you just start the next fight with half health, but there's nothing permanent going on in the run. So it doesn't matter if you had a bad start of a run. It just feels very, you know, casual in that regard, and I really, really love that aspect of it. It's a very, very enjoyable experience where every run feels very, very different. And every enemy also come with their own unique mechanics, like a minigame. Every fight is like a minigame, and every run just is going to be different. It's brilliant. It's simple. That's all I'll say, really. If you like, you know, strategy games, any strategy games, honestly, I would recommend this to many people, much more than other games on this list, just because it's super approachable and it's very easy to just get into, in my opinion. You can spend a lot of time every turn just trying to figure out what the best thing is to do. You might think that it's very RNG heavy because there's dice involved, and yes, of course, there is quite a bit of RNG naturally because there's dice, but the game gives you a lot of flexibility with them. Basically, everyone rolls a dice, and you can keep or re-roll any amount of them 3 times, pretty much. Which is very generous. The visuals are simple, but I think they're very fitting. Music is great. Very chill, very simple. I think this is the game that has the most tracks being played during this stream right now, or this video. And it's just so peaceful and chill. The game is just trying to be just a good time. And it does it very, very successfully. Yeah, Slice and Dice was one of the better games I've played last year. It's going to be a very high A tier. I'm putting it above Cobalt Core. It's just that good. Next up, we got Synthetik Ultimate. I don't know if that's actually part of the game name, but in any case, this is a kind of like a top-down shooter roguelike. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I haven't gotten. This is probably the one game on this list that I didn't get to play as much as others, but I do remember having pretty specific feelings about it. So this is a shooter roguelike that actually is pretty slow. It really does try to take a different angle in the shooter genre by pretty much trying to be more almost realistic in the way where you're going to be on a map, and when you see enemies from afar, you're trying to be stealthy, you're trying to aim impactful. You're not going to be like shooting everywhere uncontrollably without thinking. You can jam your weapon, you have to reload, you don't have that many bullets. It's really a very slow pace action roguelike in that regard, and I do respect it for that reason. I think in terms of like shooter games, action roguelikes tend to be very, very fast paced and all about just like not caring where you shoot and just like, things will die eventually. But here, you really have to be aware of your build and your character and the mechanics behind the guns. So I really like that aspect of it. In terms of the roguelike elements, it's mostly the guns. The guns really do have there's a ton of unique guns you can find with a bunch of modifiers and upgrades to put into them. That's where a lot of the meat comes in. You'll also find items and certain like upgrades here and there, but those are not, I don't think they're as critical as the guns that you'll be finding. This is a game that really focuses on the gameplay, but again, the roguelike elements are very enjoyable. One aspect that I think I wasn't super into, visually the levels do get very repetitive, and it does feel like you're just in just a big room constantly. It doesn't feel as immersive to me, since everything is so specific in this game with its stats and how things work and your health, and everything is very complicated. It's a game with a lot of details. Some bosses, I would just start the boss and I would shoot and they immediately die, and I'd have no idea why. Because there's a lot going on, and it's a little hard to keep track of everything if you're not very, very comfortable with the game. in general. There's a pretty good customization aspect at the beginning. Before runs, you can choose different classes, which do have different mechanics. You can also start with different weapons. It does take a little bit to unlock these things, and it's a bit of a shame because I would like to try different starts because there's not much else to do before starting a run. So it was kind of annoying to have to, you know, always have the same starting setup. Not to mention that if you pick a particular class, you're gonna be leveling up that class. Leveling up, I actually think, does give you actual permanent upgrades, but it also unlocks more things for future runs. But if you want to check another class, you have to start from 0. And I was like, ugh. Okay, well, I get it, right? Because you're supposed to commit to one particular class, especially if you're playing multiplayer. But I don't know. For me, I wish I was able to unlock more things. But overall, very satisfying gameplay. Seriously, when you get those headshots, they feel great because this is a game that's really precise and has a lot of details. So when you get those good shots and the sound design and VFX are fantastic, it feels great. So overall, yeah, very enjoyable experience. I could see some people really committing to this game because there's a lot to it, especially once you really know a lot about the game. I could see this game being a little intimidating for newcomers with the amount of detail and with how effectively fairly complex the core gameplay is for a shooter, but that is also part of the enjoyment of it. So if you think you want to have a, you know, fairly complex shooter game, then I would give this game a go. And for now, I'm gonna put it probably around here. Next up, we've got Tower Factory. This is another tower defense roguelike with a pretty unique twist of it being a Factorio tower defense roguelike. That's right. Basically, the idea is you're going to be you know, defending your base with towers, but in order to get resources and ways to build all these towers, you need to create a bunch of chains and things to get to your tower to just grab resources, rocks, and wood. And if you know anything about Factorio, then you know what this is going to look like, right? I myself have never played Factorio, but I really respect it. I know a lot of people that are really into Factorio. I am not into it just because I would never have the time, but I could see myself really enjoying this kind of gameplay. I haven't really been seen used for roguelikes, so I was very excited to see this one try to, you know, kind of fuse two unique concepts into a game. And I think they did a pretty good job. So first off, visually, the game is cute and simple, but I think it's quite fitting. I think they put a lot of work into just things feeling like they're flowing very visually. So it's quite satisfying to just see the pieces of wood just going from one end to another, and the rocks, and then transforming things here and there. Being able to build things from your resources is very satisfying. Now, naturally, if you know anything about Factorio, then the first thing you might think is, aren't the runs going to be extremely long? Yes! Runs can be pretty long. But I think that's fine, you know, because that's the gameplay they're trying to go for. And funny enough, I actually think it's very fitting with tower defense games, because tower defense games are known to, you know, take a while, right? Like, you're supposed to slowly build and getting more and more towers as you're getting more resources. So it actually fits quite well with each other, right? Both genres are fairly slow paced, so naturally, yes, runs are fairly long, but, you know, not hours long. Just I don't know, maybe like an hour long run or something like that, where you're just building things here and there. Maybe less, it's hard to tell. It feels long. One thing to note is that this is in early access, so things are potentially going to be changing. Basically, right now, starting a run, it's almost always the same, right? Naturally, because you just have your tower. Now, there are permanent progressions, right? There is meta progression. So, you know, the more you unlock things, the more things are going to go faster. But still, for me, like, things get really enjoyable once you get to the mid-game. The early game, it's a little slow after you've done this multiple times. You're always doing the same things. You're always starting with wood, and you're always getting rocks, and you're always going to find a way. Then once you have enough wood, you're always trying to convert some of this wood into planks. Then when you have enough of that, you're always trying to convert some of those rocks into some rock stuff. That's always the same, which can get very repetitive in my opinion. After you get past that point, you have more flexibility as to what you want to do, but early on, it's just very consistently similar. You're supposed to explore the map. A lot of it is hidden. Basically you're supposed to kill enemies and use resources to expand the map, and the more you expand, the more you're going to find more resources, while also finding some cool little upgrades and some cool well, not really upgrades, just like some little chests, some little areas where if you place a tower they'll be stronger, and then you're trying to find those gems in order to just beat the game. The way to beat the game is to just find multiple of those gems, and once you find all of them, you win. That's it. So it has nothing to do with actually going to the enemy tower or anything. You're just trying to find those gems, which is a cool concept, honestly. Just having to explore and expand the world. So currently, one thing you might have noticed, or maybe not, but one thing is this isn't really a roguelike, is it? I mean, yes, I think it is considered a roguelike, but there's really not much roguelike stuff to do in here, right? So I'm just gonna say, I kind of wish there was more roguelike elements. So what you can find on the map currently is just resources and the gems and, you know, places to put towers that are stronger. That's about it. I kind of wish there was more things to find on the map to really push you to explore even further. For instance, you know, like you know, upgrades to your towers, like unique upgrades to your towers. Because currently the towers, they're cool, but they're always the same. They're very, very minimalistic. I think you could definitely make those towers more interesting. Naturally, even though it's a tower defense game, the focus is not the towers, funny enough. It's really the whole like factorial mess. But I think you could still make the towers more interesting. I like the fact that you have a lot of flexibility as to their target priority, which is always important to have in tower defense games. But not having to upgrade them yourself, that's fine. But at least potentially finding stuff in the world that make it so like, ooh, now your catapults shoot fireballs. And you're like, oh, hell yeah, I found that. And now I'm like, ooh, maybe I can do more. So I'm going for more catapults. And then you find another catapult thing, and you're like, oh, hell yeah. So now you're going all in on catapults. But another run, you might, you know, now your spike towers do something cool. You're like, ooh, cool, I can go for more of those things. Because right now there's, like, you know, the towers, they're always doing the same thing every single time. So if there's a tower that works better in one scenario, you're just always going to be using it. But again, you know, maybe this game is not really trying to be a roguelike. I think it'd be cool to have that aspect, so I'm just gonna say it. Other than that, the whole building mechanics situation, it's, you know, it takes definitely a bit to get used to. As it is right now, I think this game is really solid. If you like the factorial kind of building aspect, and you like simple tower defense mechanics, this game is really solid. And for an early access game, I've really had a great time so far. So I'm gonna put this as an A tier here, right under RAM for now. But I look forward to seeing where this game goes in the future. Next up, we've got Vampire Hunters. This is another horde-like, but it's first person. First person horde-like. Sounds very chaotic. You are correct. You are pretty much blending the most chaotic subgenre into a first-person view. Yeah, this is pretty crazy, let me tell you. So, it's fairly straightforward mechanically, a little bit more to do than a lot of other horde-likes. You know, you can jump around, obviously you're utilizing this 3D environment a little bit more than top-down 2D. You can jump, you can dash. I mean, I think, you know, certain characters have dashes, others have different mechanics, depends on the character you're playing. You also have an ultimate move. So, yeah, there's already a little bit to do mechanically from the start in comparison to a lot of horde-likes, depending on who you're playing. And then you're going to be collecting a lot of weapons. This is a game that really, it's supposed to be just an absolute mess. You're collecting a bunch of weapons, you're going to be upgrading those weapons. The upgrades are always the same, but, you know, you can still prioritize which weapons you want to upgrade. And then you'll also find your traditional, you know, upgrades for your character that can change the mechanics of the game a little bit. I will say in general, there are not that many. I think the game could have a few more options here and there. You could probably guess how this game is gonna go just by looking at it. There's a few different levels, and there's a few different bosses. If you're looking for just a huge mess and chaos, then you can give it a shot. As for me, I wish some elements of the games were a little bit different. First off, there's a serious balance issue, in my opinion, in this game. Some weapons are just almost 10 times stronger than others just from the start. Some weapons feel terrible. Some items really don't feel impactful. There really seems to be some tweaks in the balance area, in my opinion. And if this was early access, I'd be okay with it, but this is not early access, so yeah. The characters do feel different from one another. The meta progression is pretty enjoyable. That being said, I've seen all the weapons and all the items pretty quickly, and in order to find new ones to unlock permanently, I had to play one particular character a ton to just unlock more stuff, which I wasn't a huge fan of in that regard. The different levels, it's cool to have different environments to walk around, but ultimately, one of the big issues for me in this game is that you're always doing the same thing. There's really not that much difference between every run, or even different characters or different maps. You're just going from one edge to the map, creating a train of enemies, and you're just shooting them, and then you're just moving to another edge of the map, and you're doing the same thing. Doesn't really matter the character, the weapons, the anything. It's very repetitive in that regard. Bosses are cool visually, but they don't really matter once you've gotten the meta progression. I'd say, honestly, this game is most interesting at the beginning when you don't have a lot of the meta progression, because once you've gotten to the really chaotic nature of the game, you've gotten enough meta progression where you're pretty strong, I think the gameplay gets pretty boring from there on out. But that's also attributed to a lot of the balance issues, in my opinion. It really does feel like the game was dropped in development before it was finished. It really feels like there's some stuff that just feels off to me, and if there was an extra few months of work into it, then I think it would have been much more interesting. It really does feel like something happened behind the scenes at the end, because even the final boss, Dracula, is just completely broken. Like, just doesn't seem to work correctly, and is weirdly, like, I don't know. Also, the vibe is a hit or miss for me. The music for me does not fit the game whatsoever. I don't know. It's very party-like. It's hard to explain. You'd have to hear it. But it's not really, for me, that seems like a different team was working at the same time for the music for this game. The 3D environment, the characters are, you know, they're okay. Yeah, you know, it's all about that chaos. And ultimately, the first few hours were a good time. I did finish the game. I did get to beat Dracula. And it was cool to see the different levels, even if ultimately they didn't really feel like the gameplay was particularly different from one another. But it was still a good time. I don't know if I would come back to it, but it was still an enjoyable time. So for a Horde-like, you know, being first person, I can't really recall many doing this. It's pretty unique in that regard. I'm going to put it as a low B tier, right around here. Next up, we've got WindBlown. This is a very fast-paced hack and slash adventure roguelike game, and this game was developed by the same people that did the Dead Cells. And the reason I bring this up is because, you know, Dead Cells is a very, very well-known game, and they didn't really do much after. I mean, they've continuously been, you know, updating Dead Cells. It's almost a joke at this point, right? But I was very curious when I heard that they were doing another game. There's a lot of elements in Dead Cells that you can definitely see in this game as well. So first of all, visually and audio and vibe, fantastic. The music is amazing. They have an entire like anime intro with beautiful like visuals at the beginning when you get started. It's fantastic. The music is just so epic. I think a lot of the music is composed by a DJ who just is really, really solid. I really like his stuff, and I think it's very fitting with this game. So fantastic music, and the visuals are great. The world is beautiful. The hub, it almost feels like it's similar to Skyward Sword in Zelda, where you have this big island and you're just like exploring, and you're just like in the middle of the sky. You know, it's beautiful. Oh gosh, very immersive. I love it. The gameplay is super fast, super enjoyable, and one cool aspect of this game that I really like is by keeping a lot of the immersion of this game, what they did is that they made it so that similar to Dead Cells, levels are just very, very long stretches, and even though they're super long, you go extremely fast from one place to another because you have this dash mechanic that you can just spam in between. You can't constantly spam during gameplay, but the moment you go from one platform to another, it automatically resets. so you could go, you could just go from like this extremely fast. They didn't have to do that, right? They could have just had things be closer from one another, but the satisfaction of going this fast is just so fun, and it really does kind of keep you immersed in this huge world. You really feel like you're just traversing this large area, and I love it. It's super satisfying. The gameplay itself is really extensive, I would say. You have 2 different weapons, similar to Dead Cells in that regard. You have two weapons and 2 active items that you can pick from. So it's very similar in that regard, but the game really does try to reinforce you to switch between your 2 weapons, much more than in Dead Cells. So if you start hitting with one of your weapons enough times, you'll then be able to trigger a combo, where if you switch to your other weapon, then you're gonna just create this big big attack where you have a bunch of iframes, and that's really cool. I will say it seems a little broken right now. I think like currently the strategy is just to attack quick enough so you can get the combo going, so you can have your iframes and not have to worry about evading anything, and do that as much as possible. I do feel that right now the gameplay is enjoyable, but it is kind of restricted to that concept. In terms of the enemies are really cool. I think some attacks are kind of hard to predict or to see and happen extremely fast. I get that this is a very fast-paced game, but it does, like, this attack was fine, but some enemies are just instant. And unless you know them really by heart and you know, like, when they're gonna attack by just understanding their every single enemy, it can be pretty challenging to evade attacks. I think this game is overall quite challenging, but the roguelike elements are very enjoyable. There's some really cool gifts that like the relic system that you'll find throughout the runs, and they really are very impactful, and they allow some really cool synergies. Okay, I'm gonna talk about the thing that that bugs me the most in this game. I have rarely had something bug me this much in a roguelike, and that single thing is bringing this game an entire tier for me until it is hopefully addressed differently. It might not be. Maybe it's just me. I don't think it's an inherent like mistake, but I hate it. So I've talked about this in another video about this game before, but basically there is this gift system that I just talked about, right? And you'll find a lot of gifts throughout the run, and they are very cool, very unique. They really create some super cool gameplay mechanics. Like, if an enemy is marked, and marked as like a unique thing you can find through a weapon, then something happens. And then like if multiple enemies are marked, something happens. Or if you do fire damage, then something happens. Or if you do a dash, trigger like a fire explosion, and then you can do so many synergies. Except that it doesn't matter because you're limited to just a tiny amount of gifts at all time. I don't get it. I just do not understand why they just don't put the power level much higher through the end game and let players play around with more gifts. Because currently, to me, it feels terrible that by 10 minutes in, I'm fully capped in all my gifts. Therefore, I can't pick up any of these cool looking gifts later on that I want to try to do more synergies. You can't do more than one synergy, and that's even pushing it. A lot of times you can't even commit to a full synergetic like package of gifts because there's some other gifts that are just too much, that they're just so good inherently by themselves. I feel like this game should just let players have fun with gifts. The restriction is just so extreme to me, and I do know that you have a lot of meta progression, and the more you unlock stuff throughout the game, the more you'll have more like slots, but I think you're capped at 4, and then you can get an extra 2 during runs by paying for them, paying for extra slots. I think, and that was just added recently. To me, it should be like 10 minimum from the start. I think at the start you only have 3 or something like that. Oh man, I just hate it. I am so annoyed by that personally. I don't know how other people feel about it, and if I'm alone with it, so be it. But to me, I think I would have a lot more fun if I could play around more with these gifts. And it's a shame because honestly, WindBlown is really solid currently in its early access state. It's a shame that like the only problem I really have is just so massive to me. I guess, again, the gameplay it's fun, but again, the combo system can be a little abused. You can abuse the combo system a little too much currently, probably. But again, all the different weapon types feel great and different. The gifts are super cool. I just can't play with them, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, currently you're always fighting the same bosses. But I am hoping that, you know, if they're gonna go for a similar take to Dead Cells, that it's going to be expanding a lot, you know, different biomes, different little secrets here and there. I do feel like that's what they're gonna go for. I do trust Dead Cells in that regard, the people from behind Dead Cells. So yeah, also, once again, this supposedly is going to be a multiplayer game. I'm sure it'll be really fun in multiplayer. I have been following the early access, and they have been improving the game more and more, but the gift system still seems to be disappointing to me. Currently, I would say that WindBlown is a really, really cool action game that is either a high B or A, but in current early access, I'm going to put it as a low A, and I'm hoping that it's going to go higher than that in the near future. Next up, we've got Wizard of Legend 2 that is currently in early access. This is a fast-paced hack and slash action roguelike where you pretty much control a wizard, and you can choose a bunch of different elemental spells, and yeah, you know, it's just a fun little action game. Now, this is a sequel to a beloved game, Wizard of Legend 1, which I have rated previously very highly. I might even rate it even higher than I did before. Fantastic hack and slash game. I'm going to keep this brief because I made a very long rant about this game. So if you want more details about my thoughts of this game, basically, I'm not a fan of this sequel currently, and I don't know if they'll be able to save it from its current development, even past early access. I'm hoping they will, but I don't know. There's a lot of issues I have with this game that, again, I'm not gonna delve into right now. You know, basically, Wizard of Legend 1 had a very unique and specific vibe, and it was developed by a particular team. And this game was taken by another team. And to me, it feels like the team kind of missed the point of what made Wizard of Legend 1 a good game. I feel like they tried too hard to just do something that is not Wizard of Legend 1. They just wanted to be more like Hades. And, you know, I actually did talk about a Darkest Dungeon, you know, like, oh, Darkest Dungeon 2 is good by itself, you don't have to, just don't think about the first one. But here, I really wanted to give this game a shot and not be looking. I made sure to not look at reviews and not look. And usually, I'm not about like, oh, if people think of a game one way, I'm gonna think of the same way. I really think I have my own, you know, interpretations of games. But man, this game is just disappointing. I mean, visually, I will say, people don't love the visuals because it's just so different from the first one. I actually like the visuals. I do get that, you know, it's not the same vibe as the original, but that's fine, you know. I still think it looks pretty good. The VFX are good. The gameplay is pretty good overall, but everything else is where I have issues with. I will say, in my initial video rant about this game, I had a lot of issues that are very, very specific. I really delved into a lot of specifics. A lot of the very specific things were actually addressed in the recent patch, which is great. I'm glad that they fixed a lot of the problems I had. But man, there's going to be some bigger things to deal with that I don't know how they're going to be able to fix. The original game had such a unique twist behind the whole like action genre, where instead of going through the same biome every time, every biome would be randomized depending on the element that you'll be fighting at the end, and it was all about these elemental masters. That was the whole point of the game. Here, the elemental masters are just mini bosses pretty much, and then you're always going through the same biome every time, and then you're fighting a random monster at the end. It's just, I mean, if it was Hades, I would get it, but that wasn't the point. That's not the point of Wizard of Legend, in my opinion. Also, enemies feel way more like whatever compared to the first one. The first one, it was much faster paced too. The game feels much slower here, which is fine. I mean, again, I'm comparing to the first game, but I just don't understand why they took a different angle, because I think they just decided to scrap or change a lot from the original when I just don't see the point, because the original was just so fun and unique in some of those aspects. They slowed down the pacing, which is much more mainstream and much more like Hades, while the first one was all about being fast, and that was why it was so fun and so enjoyable. The characters were kind of more interpretive. Here they have voice acting, and they try to take it super seriously and super like, huh, you're doing great job, kid. Yeah, all right, now let's go for the trials. And they're constantly talking, and it's like, oh man, I just can't take the game very seriously. And apparently not many other people can as well, which is a shame. And again, a lot of other gameplay aspects and roguelike elements are just faulty currently. There's a lot of bugs. I don't know, there's just a lot of issues I have with it. It's a shame, because there is a world where this game could end up being really, really good. And I know I said that wasn't the case at the beginning of this review, but it's just because, honestly, this is very personal to me. I'm a big fan of the original. I'm just so sad to see the angle they took for this one. It really is disappointing to me. Things feel very unbalanced. Things sometimes work, sometimes don't. Information is not very clear. The meta progression is just not very interesting. The fights against the elementalists is just not as fun and not as interesting as the original. We'll see what they're able to do. I mean, clearly they're seeing that the community is not super happy with what they're doing, so hopefully they listen and they're able to, you know, change a lot of these aspects that clearly are not working for the community. I'm gonna try, you know, I'm gonna wait a few more months. I'm gonna wait for a few more updates, and I will definitely keep giving this one a try. But I doubt it will ever be as good as the first one. Again, I'm just a little disappointed with the angle. It really feels like they missed the point of the first game. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it as currently a low C. Hopefully they can tweak some stuff here and there. But again, if you want to see my full rundown on my thoughts of this game, there is a video on my channel about it. Last but not least, we've got Wizard Chess. That's right. This is a turn-based, board-centric roguelike strategy game that is kind of like chess, except not really. This was a game that was sent to the channel, once again, a fairly small team. This game was in early access for a bit, and it is now fully released, and yeah, a lot of very unique mechanics. Basically, the way it goes is that you're going to start a run, you're going to choose one of the possible worlds, and then you have to go through a board of multiple fights. You're going to be building a team of multiple minions that are going to be with you, while you yourself, that little guy who is dead, and hopefully you're not going to be dead, is always going to be there, kind of like the king. You're always going to be surrounded by a lot of pawns that are just going to have very unique effects. So you can have like the little rogue. The little rogue moves diagonally and can attack diagonally. The little swordman can, you know, attack in just cardinal thing? I forgot how you call it. The monk can teleport places with another unit, and blah blah blah. So basically, it's all about the unique designs of all of these minions and like guys that you can find, and there's a lot of them. Like, wow, there's a ton of them to unlock, which is awesome because they all play drastically differently from one another. So in terms of like uniqueness of every single run, it's gonna feel very different. The replayability is great in this game. The gameplay itself is it's pretty strategic, but I've got to say I'm almost a little disappointed that it is turn-based in terms of you do one action and then one enemy does one action. Now, enemies attack automatically after you end a turn, but one of the issues I actually have with this game, unfortunately, is just it's very, very, very slow because everything is just one motion at a time. Now, some boards, that's fine, and it goes pretty quickly, but some of the bigger boards where there's a lot of units, if you just move one thing at a time and then everything takes their actions, but it's just, everything can be slow, and sometimes you're going to be in a situation where you just have one enemy you're trying to beat, but they're just moving one here, and you just want to move here, and they're moving back, and you're moving back, and you move here, and you move back. I know that obviously that would change the entire game, but it's almost sad to me that everything is just one action at a time. Nevertheless, the gameplay is still enjoyable. I did actually really have a great time discovering all the units of all the different bosses. And there are a few roguelike elements within the runs. I mean, you can upgrade certain units by giving them like elemental traits which do specific things, which is cool. It doesn't get super deep in that regard. I mean, really the most unique aspect is just all the different minions that you have, and just they play so differently from one another, then that's really where the meat is. And you can upgrade those units by giving them better stats, and the stats are very important in that regard and really do change things quite drastically. One thing that's kind of weird to me that I still am not understanding it fully, or that's just how it is, but you can have a bunch of units in your team, right? But then you can only have a certain amount at the same time during a fight, and I can't seem to know how to choose which unit you want to be present. I think it's random, which seemed a little odd to me. Maybe I'm not fully understanding that concept. I know it seems like a pretty important component, but I played this game for many hours, and I still don't fully understand that concept, because I would like to be able to fully be able to customize who's going to be fighting with me during a battle, and even choose where they spawn would be awesome. But I love the vibe of the game as well. It's very unique. I like the 2D sprites in this 3D environment. I think it's very fitting in this regard. They're all kind of like grooving to the music, and the music is so good. The music is just a big band jazz, and it's so cool. My goodness, it is so awesome. I love it. And the fact that all like the characters have kind of like a nice little idle animation that's fairly quick. It really feels like everybody's kind of dancing to the music, even though they're not really. But I love that. In terms of like the progression throughout a run, yeah, there's a few, as you could see, as you were able to see, there was like a little moment where you could like you were trying to find some chests before everything was crumbling. That's a cool little, it's a nice little side quest thing you can do during some runs. You'll find some shops, you'll find some little events. It doesn't get too crazy in that regard. There's also another mode that is all about trying to build a team as fast as possible before fighting the final boss. And basically you're restricted to a certain amount of moves or a certain amount of time. And that game mode is really fun too. It feels less like a commitment, and it's just a good time, and you still get to unlock some things by completing this mode. So also when you do like a traditional run and you go fight a boss, once you've beaten it, you can then replay the world, but at a higher difficulty. And the higher difficulty isn't just like, oh, more damage, more health kind of type. No, they actually introduce new mechanics, and there definitely feels like there is a reason to try to go higher and higher in difficulty, and it is very rewarding when you get there. The boss fights, with the core mechanic of things just being one turn at a time, they can be kind of trivial sometimes. If you just have the right team, you can just easily kill the boss without any problem, while sometimes you're just like, oh, well, I can't really do anything for the next 5 turns. I'm just going to be moving back and forth until something changes. If you're looking for like a cool, unique little, board-centric strategy roguelike, I think this game did a pretty great job, and I think it's impressive how much content there is in terms of the characters that you can find. I had a good time, and again, the music, oh my goodness, you just gotta play this game just to listen to the music. It's just so fun. So with a chess, I'm gonna put it as a it's a pretty fun B tier, probably somewhere around here. There you go. That's my final list of all these games. Only one S tier, but again, so many A tiers, and a lot of these are also in early access and can potentially go higher up and all that stuff. But again, like, I'm so happy to see so many A-tier games. And again, maybe you'll consider them to be S-tiers. Again, all of these games I think have potential to be, someone's favorite game. And if so, then awesome. I'm glad that is the case. Once again, if you disagree with anything I said, then, feel free to bring it up in the comments. I really do love talking about all this. I have very specific taste myself. I'm just putting my own thoughts on the internet. So if you disagree, let me know why, because I always find it interesting. Thanks again for watching. Once again, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. I will be doing another tier list in the next few months because I keep on playing more and more great roguelikes. So look forward to that one. I'm also going to be releasing more and more fully edited, like design videos. They just take a long time. I'm currently working on one for Roguelikes, so look forward to that. If you're interested in seeing some of those games being played live, I do stream 2 to 3 times a week where I play games that have been sent to the channel, as well as more popular games that I'm just going to be spending time, just ranting about. So if that interests you, then feel free to, follow the channel. I'm really hungry, so once again, I'm going to go.